Signal me when. Please stand for the national anthem. Hello, Barbadians. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are. Welcome. It is great to have Barbadians in the diaspora online to engage with the Parliamentary Reform Commission of Barbados on the issue of reforming our parliament. How do we expand our democracy? How do we better include and represent your interests? This is your opportunity to tell us. We have Barbadians from all over the world joining us today, and we look forward to hearing from you, your views, your suggestions, your recommendations, and maybe one or two people may have some things to say about that are critical of the current system. But we want to hear it all because the Parliamentary Reform Commission of Barbados is listening to what you have to say and including your views, your recommendations in the report, which we will deliver to Her Excellency the President sometime early next year. You may be aware that the members of the Commission are Sir Richard Cheltenham, our Chairman, Sir Roy Trotman, our Deputy Chairman, Dr. Richard Ishmael, Mr. Corey Beckles, Attorney at Law, Ms. Maxine McLean, and Dr. William Chandler. Mr. Pedro Eastman, who is an attorney and the Clerk of Parliament, is the official secretary to the Commission. I am Liz Thompson, a member of the Commission and Deputy President of the Senate of Barbados. This evening, we are keen to hear from you, and there was a lot of excitement earlier in the evening as we tried to get our technical operations right. We've now got everything ready, and we can hear from you. I just want to establish, please, some housekeeping rules. First of all, please keep your camera on, but your microphone off. This is a live streamed or televised event. We therefore want to see people. We want to see faces. We want to see when you're laughing or frowning or what's happening in the space around you. We want it to be an animated and excited engagement. But we don't want to hear you if you are not the principal speaker at the time. So please keep your microphone off if you are not speaking. In fact, there may be some things happening in your background that you wouldn't necessarily want to share with us. It's a good housekeeping rule for Zoom meetings. Haven't set the rules and told you hello. We are apologizing for the late start. We had technical challenges, but we are ready now. And you've already started to follow that rule. I want to say that interpreting for the hearing impaired this evening are Bonnie Leonce and And Paula Medford, we're starting with Paula, so you will be seeing her first, and then we go to Bonnie. Our technical team oversight is at the controls. We look forward to having a great evening and to hearing from you. I turn the microphone now. Let me just explain that the meeting is 4 hours long, or scheduled for 4 hours. There are 8 commissioners, and we are going to divide the meeting into 4 segments. The first hour will be moderated by the chairman, Sir Richard Cheltenham, and the deputy, Sir Roy Trotman. You will meet your moderators in the next set of moderators in the second hour. I don't want to take up any more time. Please let me welcome you again, say how wonderful it is to see Barbadians and to hear Barbadians wherever they are in the world, and to let you know that this is where your navel string is buried, and we welcome you virtually to the Rock. Sir Richard Cheltenham will come to the microphone now to share his opening remarks.
Good afternoon, fellow Barbadians at home, fellow members of the Parliamentary Commission, and Barbadians across the Diaspora. I want to greet especially those of you who are in the United States of America, in England, in Canada, and I mention in particular our people in Toronto, representatives in Toronto, those in Brussels, in Ghana, those in Brazil, in Kenya, in Dubai, in China, in Cuba, and across the rest of the Caribbean. I extend a hearty good afternoon to all of you. I am pleased to open this public meeting of the Parliamentary Reform Commission, which is likely to be our last. And I wish to take this opportunity to thank all those who have supported the Commission's work to date, whether by attending online or in person, or by sending in their suggestions. A democracy like ours cannot function at its best without the participation and cooperation of its citizens. And on behalf of all the commissioners, I extend my sincerest thanks to all of you who have participated in any form or fashion. I particularly want to thank you who are hearing us for sacrificing your Sunday lunch now, if indeed that has happened, or breakfast, to be with us once again. This Zoom hall meeting is an important one, which was always on the agenda for the Commission. Barbados is a country which has experienced waves of emigration following emancipation. Perhaps the first most significant of these waves was to Panama, 1881 to 84, and then 1904 to 1913. Many Barbadians, as you know, went to Panama to work as laborers on the construction of the Panama Canal. Wives and girlfriends followed. Many went and never returned. But in any event, they sent back Panama money to aid friends and family left behind. And I'm sure that even if we went to Panama today, we would have Spanish-speaking Boyces and Griffiths and Braffits, all of them carrying well-known Barbadian names. The second wave of emigration was that to the United Kingdom. This was the Windrush generation. Took place between 1955 and 50, just before Janet, and ended by 61. And in this second wave, which was the UK, many Barbadians were called upon to rebuild war-torn London. And so we went as nurses, maids, laborers, and general workers. And work was found too with the assistance of the government, with London Transport and with hospitals. Emigration has always been a feature of our society. And even today, we have well-trained people going abroad for opportunities in America, in Canada, and Europe. I feel certain, and I'm sure you feel certain too, that wherever we travel, we can find a Bajan. Remittance money became the source of tremendous changes in land ownership at home, small business ownership as well. And that remittance money caused the transformation of entire villages and communities. Many of our young people left to find better opportunities, and the money which they sent home had a transformative impact on their families' fortunes and on the wider Barbadian society. In recent times, the amount of remittances have decreased as people have passed away and generations move on. However, the psychological ties to Barbados have been passed on to the young generation. And it is not unusual to meet a Londoner or a New Yorker who gleefully relates that his mother or dad is or was Bajan, and that they are looking forward to going home, to coming home during their annual holiday. And they come not as visitors, but as family from abroad. I think it's safe to say that Barbados' connection to its diaspora remains strong. Bajans overseas retain a keen interest in the life of the country, including its public life, and are always happy to make their contribution. It is for these reasons that the Commission knew on formation that the diaspora was a constituency that had to be consulted as part of its work. I'm sure that many of you followed the Commission's sessions online, but it might be useful to recap a bit of our focus and purpose. The Commission's task is to examine our parliamentary institutions in the context of Barbados' change from a constitutional monarchy to a republic, which took place just 2 years ago in 2021. When many of you left Barbados, we still had a Queen and a Governor General, the Queen's representative here in Barbados. The system that we had then meant that several decisions, including the appointment of our diplomats, had to go through Buckingham Palace. The Queen never refused any name submitted, but it did delay things. Additionally, persons required to take the oath of office, including parliamentarians and judges, had to swear their oath of allegiance to the Crown, not to the country Barbados. The removal of the Queen as head of state and her replacement with our Barbadian president has changed all of that. The Parliamentary Reform Commission has consulted extensively with Bajans at home, and now we want the views of Barbadians abroad. We want your opinions on how you think our Parliament has worked in its almost 400 years of operation, and what changes need to be made now as we rise to meet the challenges of the modern era. I and my fellow commissioners look forward to hearing from you on these issues. and I identified just a few. Should we retain our two houses of Parliament, the House of Assembly and the Senate? Or should we have only one? Should we have a fixed-term Parliament? Or should we retain the existing system whereby the Prime Minister of the day determines when the Parliament should come to an end within the 5-year term, whether after 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years? Should our President's tour of duty only be for a fixed term of 5 years or 6 years, or at most 7 years? These are just some of the many issues on which we would like to hear your views as we work towards the conclusion of our deliberations and the submission of our report by mid-February. And with that, I think I have said enough. I hope that we have stimulated your interest. And except for one further question which I pose, should we retain our electoral system based on first-past-the-post principle? Given what happened in the last 2 general elections, where the Democratic Labour Party opposition received the second highest number of votes cast, but got no seats? Or should we retain the first-past-the-post system, which we are familiar with, and which is easy to follow, but make arrangements such that the opposition has always 4 or 5 seats in the Senate? Is that the answer? These are among the many issues on which we need to hear from you. And do not be afraid or inhibited to call and to speak up. No viewpoint is a silly one. It might not be a popular one, but in 15 years or 20 years, it might be a dominant opinion. So do not be inhibited in any way. I think I've perhaps overspoken. And so at this point, I'm going to take my seat and look forward to hearing from you in large measure. Thank you.
Call, you have heard Sir Richard Cheltenham. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to receive comments, suggestions. Just indicate. We have our technicians who will assist in that exercise. Who's going to be the first?
Can I be able to speak? Can everyone hear me?
Go right ahead, sir. Just let us know the full name, just for our records, and the name and where you're calling from.
Well, my name is Andrew Reid. I'm calling from Tottenham in London, UK.
Recording in progress.
And people may know of my grandfather, Melville Uriah Williams, who lived to 111 years in Barbados, and I'm his grandson.
Go ahead, please.
Unionist. But as to the points of what the opening remarks were about in terms of how long we should have a president for, I've from the UK, I favour a system of every 4 years. I favour a system no more than two terms maximum, to give opportunity to other people, because I think over a certain period of time, dictatorship becomes more accessible, and it rears its ugly head. I think the people should have the majority vote. It's only a small island, and first past the post, I don't think it's really quite a fair system. I think with many Barbadians out there that are slow to get to the election polls and so forth, and just because one side has their group in there first and they get past the post first, I don't see how that really is going to be quite fair. So I think they need a change to that, definitely. I'm not too sure about one or two parliamentary groups, but I think that's open to the debate. But certainly for me, from the UK, I favour someone 4 years and maximum 2 years so there'll be change and prosperity. I think the last time I visited the island was in 2020, I believe, and did I see much progress after 7 years? I still see the roads from town to Spitestown in a very poor condition. As a trade unionist, I worry about the workers' rights, especially the Barbadians, and I do concerned about overseas people that are not Barbadians buying up all the land and property and assets of Barbados, and we don't have control. Why do we have independence when we don't have control of our own assets in our country? And this is the same feeling I do for Africa as well, and the wider. But that's my opening comments. I hope it's received well.
Thank you very much indeed for your contribution, and we are pleased that you have followed our suggestions when we sent out our invitation. You've spoken to the point, and you have kept yourself brief. We appreciate that very much. Are there any other persons ready to make a contribution?
Hello, my name is Myrna Lashley. I'm the Honorary Consul from Barbados at Montreal. I most definitely think that that it should be 4 years. Within a 5-year plan, I think the 4th year is when we should start looking at elections. I also feel that the president's job should be time limited. I don't know if you want to make it 2 terms, that's fine. I was very concerned in the last 2 elections at the lack of opposition members, because for democracy to function properly, you do need someone who's going to bring a different perspective. So it may be time to look at proportional representation, although I do favor first past the poll. In a small country like Barbados, we may want to start looking at proportional representation. And for now, I think that answers the 2 main questions you've put out. I'll have more to say about other things later, but to respond to your questions, that's what I think.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there other contributors?
I'd like to speak. I'm Dual Jones. I'm from Montreal. And one of my concerns were when I saw not too long ago where people were coming in from outside and buying up the land and then want to block off a part of the sea. They tell you, in other words, they're going to build and then they're going to block off a section so that people can't pass. And like Gabby said, that beach is mine. I can bathe anytime. So this is something you have to look into, because how do you block a beach? The island is surrounded by water. So how do you block off a section or say, well, this piece is mine and that piece is mine and that piece is mine? You can't do that. So that's something you have to look into, along with allowing outsiders to come up and buy too much land on the island. And another thing I want to find out about tenantry land. So that's my spiel for now. Thank you.
And thank you too. Are there other speakers? And remember, we are looking for you to tell us how you believe we are going to improve the democracy that we enjoy here in Barbados. The idea of land ownership is one of the areas, but how can Parliament help to make it satisfy what you are looking for? Keep your thoughts on the subject and continue to let us hear what changes you would like to see made. Who's going to be next?
Hi, this is Cynthia from Montreal, Barbados, South Montreal. Just echoing some of the feedback that we have received so far during this time. I'm wondering as well, what can we do to offer opportunities for those people living in the diaspora who are residents of Barbados to participate in the election? That's one of the things that we have heard from time to time again when the elections come up. How can Barbadians overseas participate in the election? So I think that's one thing that maybe we can also take a look at as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I see somebody else wanting to contribute. Go ahead, please. So I believe that somebody who wanted to speak may have got put off one way or the other, but remember, you are free to make contributions, make suggestions. This commission has a very important task to perform in making our republic a better place. We can only do that if you help by your contributions this afternoon in this session. We are waiting for your call.
May I add to what I said before? Would that be acceptable?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, one of the questions you asked and to which I did not respond was the continuing to have the upper house. I do believe that an upper house is necessary. I don't know if you want to continue calling it an upper house, but I think that measure which gives the government pause and which goes through another iteration of what is possible, what is not possible, and what is in the interest of the citizens is important. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you for the opportunity to add that.
Thank you very much. That further comment is well received. Our task is to look at what the Parliament does now and to look at what, in the Commission's view, are the views of the public regarding what changes are required to be made to make democracy more meaningful and to have you take greater part and feel more comfortable with what we are doing under our new republic. Please let us have your views. we have been having meetings besides our Zoom meetings. We've had meetings with several members of the public. It may interest you to know very much that we have also involved the young people, and we have had very keen interest shown by members of our secondary school systems and by those young people at our community colleges. We have been very pleased at the great interest that they are showing in how Barbados for the future should organize its governance of its own interests. And we have been very impressed that they have a vision for how they can participate in the new republic. Am I seeing somebody else desirous of speaking? The floor is yours. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to reiterate what was said earlier regarding voting abroad. During the prior two elections, I've had several inquiries as to how the individuals, Barbadians in the diaspora, could vote, and it was impossible for them to do so. My concern is knowing that I don't know the exact number of Barbadians abroad currently, but I know there are several. I know there are thousands. And I think it's important and really a time that is due for that opportunity to be. I know it's maybe technically challenging sometimes, but I think it's something that really needs to be addressed. I also want to say that you mentioned before about the youth getting involved in these discussions. And I happened to, a couple of days ago, view some of those young people given their positions, and I was extremely impressed because my position is I'm pretty advanced in age right now, and I know that this is what Barbados becomes from here on is for the future of these young people. And I think that has to be highly focused in terms of how we address the new reforms for the Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your contribution. Could you let us know, please, the name? We would like to, when you address that, you would give us the name. It would help us if we are able to have somebody contact you in some instances, especially where you are close to one of our overseas missions, and we can express our appreciation to you. Yes, sir.
Yes, actually, I did say I was in Texas. I'm the consul for Texas, but yes, I reside in Barbados and in Houston, Texas.
Good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Oh, the audience we have here in Barbados have indicated to us that we haven't heard the name. So could you do that a little more clearly, please?
Okay, I'll do it very slowly. I'll even spell it. It's Dr. Louis, Louis, Brown, Browne. And that's me.
Got you this time. Thank you very much. All right.
Welcome.
Go ahead. You continue.
No, I said you're very much welcome. No problem.
Okay, that's all right. Are there any other persons? It might interest you to know that one of the things we have been hearing about has been the question of whether gender is properly addressed in the Parliament and the extent to which people would like to see some revisit of that arrangement. It may very well be that it is one of the things that cause you concern where you are now, and if you have a point of view on the matter, we are very willing to hear that, as well as your views on any other particular part of representation of the interests of men and women in Barbados.
Hello. I'm sorry to take up so much, to be speaking so often. I'm trying not to.
No, go
For the
right ahead,
record,
ma'am. Go right ahead.
Okay,
You
for
free
the
to
record,
speak.
for my name, I'm Dr. Myrna Lashley. I'm the honorary consul from Barbados to Montreal. In terms of gender, I certainly think that we have to look at parity. I don't know how much that is being observed right now, but it's certainly something we have to consider. I'm also very concerned about the way, we treat women and children within the society. I don't know what can be done legislatively about how some people treat women, but I do think it's something which needs to be addressed, that women have to be seen as equals, not just philosophically, but certainly socially, in the way we interact with people, in the way we treat people. The respect for women I find when I go home is often lacking by certain persons. I'm also concerned about the attitude that we have towards children, and especially female children. We have ascribed to the rights of the child under the UN Charter, and while it may be fast within Parliament, we have not managed to transmit that message to many persons who are interacting with children and the way we treat them. They have rights, and those rights have to be respected. Yes, they need guidance, but obviously beating children is out of the question. So I noticed lately that there was a bill that was being discussed in Parliament about just how children should be treated and the abuse of children. And I certainly want to support that, but I would say it has to go beyond the walls of Parliament and somehow get that into the society. Thank you once more for allowing me to speak.
Hello, it's Jewel again. Dr.
Go right ahead,
Lashley,
please.
I am
Go
so
right ahead.
happy that you brought up the subject of child abuse, because I witnessed something in 2015 when I was there, and this mother was beating this child. The child could be about 7, and everyone was looking through the window, and people came outside like if it was a big show. And I couldn't take it anymore because the kid was screaming and she was beating the child and kicking it and all kind of stupidness. And I said, I made sure that I came outside to make eye contact with the mother. And when I made the eye contact with the mother, the way I looked at her, she stopped. And then I approached her and I said to her, how old is that little boy, your son? And she said, he's 7. I said, what could he have done so terrible that you're not only beating him, but you're kicking him too? What is it that he did was so terrible? And she said he was walking home from school with his peers, and they decide to throw some rocks at cars as they pass, and one of the stones hit a windshield. And she was just beating the money out of him because she says, I don't know where I'm going to find the money to replace this windshield, And I spoke to her, and I just calmed her down, and I was happy that I got involved because everybody was just looking on and not saying anything. Nobody wants to get involved because I'm minding my business and all this. But in the meantime, if that same child died, everybody's going to turn up at the funeral. Everybody's going to have to say a thing. I want people to have the say now. If you see something, say something. It's not that bad. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I like what you say, that if you see something, you should say something. And when you have been coming, have you been seeing things that you would want to say to us that would cause the kinds of changes you feel that we could have to make a better place for Barbados? Are
Yeah.
you making such a suggestion in your comment now?
I would say we need more. We still, as Barbadians, we still have this thing about this beating. You know, the first thing is a belt or a stick or God knows I get some tambour rods in my day. But I think now that we are at a stage in 2023 that we should be able to speak to the kids rather than beating the kids. Let them have a say, okay? I will also add that when I came up here, I was 17 years old, so I mostly grew up in Montreal, but I kept going back and forth to Barbados, and I studied social work, social services, and I realized that the training that the Irish child gets in the Caribbean doesn't pan out up here. And I'm saying that because in Barbados, mostly when a child is talking to an adult, the head would be down. God forbid you look your grandmother in the eye or something, the head is down. Over here, I had a problem. They saw it as rude when the child hold down the head. You see, so it's a big conflict and confusion when they come from the Caribbean and arrive in Montreal. It's hard for them to adjust because they're saying, well, look, when I was home, my grandmother told me not to look me in the eye. And now I'm here, you're telling me that I have to hold up my head and look you in the eye. So I don't know what's happening, you know? We call the professors here by their names. In Barbados, you call them sir, madam, Mrs., good morning, whoever, you know? So it's a totally different ball game. And I would like to see more communication between mother and child, or parents and child, father and child, depends on, or opposite genders and children. Please communicate with those children. If you find that there is a child that is not being communicated to, then train that parent, talk to the parent, you know. Don't just the first thing be to take the child out of the home. Talk to the parent, talk to the child if you have to aside, and see what's really going on in that home, you know. So I am just hoping that I was speaking to High Commissioner Glenn Clark, and he said, I remember in a meeting with him on the same Zoom, and he asked if there was anything that we could do up here as professionals to get in contact with the schools down there in Barbados to give your experiences and your input. So that I'm going to look into with him, because I would really like to address some of the schools sometimes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Could I suggest to you that you get in touch with Ambassador Clark, High Commissioner, and that you carry these ideas, what ideas you have, and any suggestions for how you can contribute in the splendid ideas that you obviously have in trying to make for a better performance. We are, however, today appreciative of that, but we want as well to look at the question of the government and the governance, how the Parliament should be organized. Is it satisfying the needs of the members of the population, the Barbados population in Barbados and in the diaspora? And what would you suggest are means by which we can improve on the performance of our Parliament? If you have those ideas, please let us know. Dr. Chelton and I are soon going to step down and another team will come, but we could take two more suggestions.
May I speak, please? Diane Hill. I'm from England. In the last New Year's Honours list, I was awarded an OBE for services to the administration of justice, but of course, as now we're a republic, that won't be recognised in Barbados. I agree with the suggestion that was in the chat about people outside of Barbados being able to vote, because we have to comply, but we have no say. I also agree with the lady who spoke of the selling of property. The size of the island of Barbados and preserving its heritage maybe should look at some of the Scandinavian countries and move towards not allowing people who do not have ties to Barbados from buying the properties. Because if you look into the future and the properties have been sold to people who come now and then, what will not only the people within the island, but the returners that you want to attract be able to do? The third thing is that there was a huge promise of grandparent heritage in 2019, 2020, and it hasn't been realised. But you see, I was born in England, my husband was born in England, I'm a Barbadian, but my children have no right to be Barbadians. My children's children have no right to be Barbadians. So when I die, does our link with Barbados then cease? So I would really like a bit more just thought about how the diaspora can continue and what can be done to address that. Thank you ever so.
I was just double checking with my colleague, and we are both indicating that it seems to us as though the matter that you are raising is a matter that you might wish in your discussions with your head of mission to get further information on. From where we are today, we are addressing a very specific area of concern, and we are not in a position to speak to some of those personalized questions that you are raising. We have no doubt that it's important to you, but could you speak more fully to your head of mission in that particular case? We'll take one more, and then we are going to ask Ms. Dr. Chandler and Senator and Ms. McLean to take our place on the podium, on the platform. Is there another speaker?
Yeah. I've had my hand up, Soraya, if I can go ahead.
Well, welcome. You have the floor, Mr. Wickham. And while you are speaking, you may see Dr. Cheltenham and me move from the podium, but that's only because we are changing shift. But you have the floor.
Okay. I thought maybe, Mr. Chairman, that you were leaving the chair as I started to speak because you had grown tired of hearing from me over the years, so that would be entirely reasonable, but I wouldn't hold it against you. Ladies and gentlemen of the diaspora, good afternoon and welcome to all of you, or good morning, depending on where you are. I find myself in a peculiar position these days where I'm outside of Barbados more than in, and I thought it appropriate to get involved in this conversation for the overseas Barbadians, since I, for some reason, seem to be one of them these days. The issue of overseas voting is something that has come up, and I had the good fortune of working in another vineyard on proposals that were similar in the country of St. Kitts and Nevis. I wanted to flag a couple of concerns since I realized that this has come up on almost every single conversation about reform within the diaspora, and people overseas want to vote for good reasons. I think there are very good reasons why people overseas should want to vote, and I think that there are very good reasons why it should be facilitated. The challenge is that if this process is made easy and more people start to vote, if we have additional numbers of people consistent with the promise of government to make persons of the first and second generation Barbadians, like the previous speaker has indicated, we are going to have an exponentially large number of people voting. The challenge I have with this is that in some recent elections, we have had majorities of 50 or 100 or 200. And this can be problematic because it is not so much a question of if these people vote, but where they vote. Technically speaking, you vote for a representative. So if you're a resident overseas, and in some instances, the family home and so on that you may have come from originally is not functioning, you may find yourself having to register somewhere. You may just register anywhere. And there's so limited control over that, it may come to a situation where the vote overseas gets to determine the outcome of an election in functional terms. And essentially, that's exactly what happened in St. Kitts. We came up with a solution to a similar problem. And essentially what was created was this concept of voting based on domicile, where persons would domicile themselves in their family home or the area that they grew up in where the navel string was buried. And they would be able to do so on the basis of just signing an affidavit. The challenge is that the legislation also allowed people to change their domicile because this natural feeling that you have for a place can change over time, and you may have a feeling to another place. And we found that it was being changed willy-nilly. In the case of St. Kitts, the diaspora is 3 times as large as the number of people voting, which is 40,000. My suspicion is that in due course, the diaspora of Barbados will also grow to a similar size. So the idea of having persons overseas registered and voting in the way that they currently do now under our current system, in my opinion, is something I would strongly advise against, because I think essentially you would be leaving an electoral system in the hands of persons who don't actually live in Barbados, who can vote overseas at an embassy or vote overseas via the internet, and then they leave the residents of Barbados to deal with decisions that they have made. And I think that's highly unwise. So what I have proposed in my own submissions to this body, and also to the constitutional reform body that is accompanying it as well, is that we create some kind of a vehicle where we have a diaspora representative, and we let persons who are resident in the diaspora vote for that person. Or that person can sit in Parliament, in the lower house, in the upper house, or wherever, but ultimately that person will be the sum total of the ability to vote for persons overseas. And I think it's tidier. It's interestingly enough something that Ralph Gonzalez proposed when he had constitutional reform in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, because they have a similar problem. So it gives us the opportunity to have someone to express our concerns that are coming from overseas, but it also locks that support down to one person, and it doesn't create a situation in which that individual or we can change the course of government by the basis of voting. In the case of, I think, St. Michael, Southeast, there was a 50-vote margin 2 elections ago, and a few people there could have made a difference. So that would have been my proposal, and I am hoping that in the course of your conversations, and this issue comes up again, that you will give consideration, and I hope that the Commission will also give consideration to the proposal I have made, which helps to address not only your concerns for the diaspora, but also the political reality that we face in Barbados, where it would be highly unwise to just have 200,000-300,000 people just joining the electoral register of voting from a place that they live. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Totally agree with Peter. Totally agree with Peter.
Well, thank you very much. And before I respond to Mr. Wickham, I just want to say that this is Maxine McLean taking over with Commissioner Corey Beckles. And we want to thank those of you who would have made contributions so far, and we look forward to those who will speak later. I will make one comment about Mr. Wickham's contribution, and then I will ask our members of our diplomatic representatives to turn their cameras on and identify themselves. And I want to thank Peter for his comprehensive explanation of the complexity of diaspora voting. And my only comment would be that if you do a little bit of checking on the census information in our various jurisdictions, the UK, the USA, and Canada, those persons who have identified to be of Barbadian heritage, together they outnumber the voters in Barbados. So that probably also contextualizes the point that Peter made. But the issue of diaspora representation is an important one. Having said that, I want to welcome anyone who joined after we officially started. And I now want to invite our diplomatic representatives, as I said, to turn their cameras on and share with us who you are. Please and thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Arturo Vasquez from Belize, our council here in Barbados.
Thank you very much. I believe that's our honorary council in Belize, if I heard correctly.
Yes, yes.
Yes, honorary council Belize. Thank you very much.
Good
I'm Dr. Myrna
afternoon.
Lashley, honorary council in Montreal.
Thank you, Dr. Lashley, and thanks for your contribution so far.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm Simone Rudder.
This is Roel Carter, honorary consul in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carter. I think I saw Ambassador Rudder, so you can turn your camera back on, ma'am.
It's still on, Ms. McLean. Good afternoon to the members of the commission and members of the community across the globe. I'm Simone Rudder. I'm the ambassador of Barbados in Brussels. And the embassy here covers Belgium, Germany, France, Luxembourg. And all of our members of registered diaspora members have been invited, and I hope that they are on the call, or some number of them are on the call. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. This is Marilyn Mosley, honorary consul for Barbados in British Columbia.
Thank you.
This is Dr. Louis Brown. I'm honorary consul for Barbados in Texas. I spoke earlier, and I did introduce myself then.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Sonia Marvel Carter, Barbados' Consul General at Toronto.
Thank you. Do we have any other representatives with us?
Timothy Chatterton, honorary consul for Barbados to St. Lucia.
Thank you, Mr. Chatterton. Okay, I believe that they are the ones present, and I'm sure we will be joined by others. Remember, we are having a meeting of 4 hours, and I note that we've had good participation from members in Canada and a couple from the UK. Are there any Barbadians across the US willing to share with us on the issue of reform in Parliament and how, as our meeting is themed? Okay, while we wait for those persons to share with us, I perhaps will ask Mr. Beckles to, say something and to encourage our folks to talk to us.
Thank you, Commissioner McLean. I am very heartened by the participation thus far. We have just about, I see 99 participants in the room. I believe our limit is 100. So we are grateful as the Parliamentary Reform Commission for the persons who have joined with us from the diaspora. We have a question in the chat. What is the role of an honorary consul? But I'm going to ask Ambassador Elizabeth Thompson to answer that question on behalf of the Parliamentary Reform Commission. Ambassador Thompson.
No, he was asking you, there was a question about what is the role of an honorary consul, but since I'm sitting here, you want to I can probably do it. I should know, hopefully. The the Honorary Council pretty much functions as our councillors. For example, we have a Council General in Miami or whatever the case may be. These are paid professionals or political appointees. In many locations, let's say in a large country like the US, the UK, or countries, Canada, we are able to draw on the generosity, let me say, of Barbadians who are willing to represent the country in a similar capacity. The difference is that, as the title says, they're honorary, and they function representing the interests of Barbados in a very similar manner to our official consular corps, should I say, our consular corps, which is part, so they function essentially the same way, but as I said, it is a public service that they are giving to the country in that capacity. Therefore, for example, we would have heard from at least 3 or 4 of our honorary consuls so far, Dr. Lashley, Dr. Brown, and I'm not sure I captured all the names, so that essentially is it. But representing Barbados, and essentially looking after the interests of Barbadians in the particular cities or locations in which they serve. And in some cases, they may very well also be honorary consuls, as you heard from Belize, nationals or citizens of the country or city where they reside. So we have an honorary consul in Belize who is Belizean. We have in Montreal an honorary consul who is Barbadian. I hope that explains it in a way that satisfies the person who raised the question. Is there anything else you want to share? Are there any other persons? I'm inviting Barbadians, as I said, in New York, in Miami. Are you here? Go ahead, please. Are there any voices that we want to hear? I'm surprised that our audience is so quiet. Okay.
Sir George Allen is asking for the floor.
Okay, Sir George, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clean. First of all, hello to all of my good friends on the panel, on the podium, and off the podium. It's good to see Ambassador Rudder in Brussels. I've been following not very closely the work of this commission, but when I got the invitation from Ms. Thompson, that was an order. So I therefore had to appear today and had to make some comment. A couple of comments I would make as I follow the discussion and listen to Sir Richard's opening remarks. First of all, I'm not sure that parliamentary reform is really relevant to our being a republic or not, because a parliamentary functions, I think, are discharged whether or not one is a republic or not. So I don't think that is particularly germane to our being a republic or not. I have always thought that Parliament basically serves 3 functions. And if you're going to think of reform, you'd have to think of which of those functions are not being performed adequately and what can we do to improve the performance. Because I like to take a functional approach. What are the basic functions of a parliament in a democracy? And I think the first function is to represent the electorate. That is the first function. I think the second function is to make laws. And the third function is really to oversee the executive, oversee the government by a series of hearings or questionings. So I think those 3 basic functions. Let me deal with the first one, representing the electorate. If you're going to represent the electorate, then I think the first past the post is not the most fair, shall I use that word, fair way of representing the electorate. I think there has to be some other system that guarantees that those of the electorate who did not support the winning faction or party, that they still have some voice. So this is why I am in favor of some form of proportional representation, which gives either proportional representation or the assurance that in the parliament, the voices of those who did not form the majority, those voices are heard as well. I think systems have shown a great deal of disaffection by those persons who lose, in inverted commas, the election, feeling they have no say in what happens in a period, some period of time. So that's the first point, the representing the electorate. The making of laws, before I proceed from there, in terms of representing the electorate, there are other options to have a specific number of seats reserved for the losers in the election. That is another option. And representing the electorate, one has to be, in this context, the idea of gendered balance comes in. If the electorate is composed of 50% men and 50% women, then presumably the parliament should represent that disposition, that numbers in its members. That is a very difficult one to legislate. But I think that there's a general feeling abroad that, in fact, there has to be some order or some clause written into the laws that ensures that there's a certain representation of female representation in Parliament. But when one does that, one has to be clear as to the groups one wants to ensure having representation in Parliament. The brouhaha in Australia shows the difficulty in doing this at the moment. But I would be in favor of assuring in some manner that there is proportional representation, gender representation in Parliament, and assuring that all of the Barbadian citizens feel that they have a role to play and have a stake in the Parliament, and some form of proportional representation, I think, would ensure that. The making of the laws is a more difficult one, and I'm not sure that we are competent to give an opinion on how the laws are made. How does the impetus for a law, or how does the background for a law reach the level of a parliamentary decision? And that is something I think would have to be examined before one can comment on whether it's efficient or not, or whether the problems of the day reach the level of which they become laws. Is it a matter of the manifesto of the winning party? It's a measure of inviting suggestions from the electorate. The way in which things become laws is a troubling one, and I think this would have to be given some consideration. How do public problems reach to the level where they are considered in Parliament and become laws? And in terms of overseeing the executive, I think that's fairly simple. I think that any good Parliament can devise. I don't think there needs to be a major reform of Parliament to ensure that the Parliament can oversee what the government does. The Parliament, however constituted, can determine the committees or have the necessary hearings to question whether the government, whether the executive is behaving, is acting in the best interest of the country as a whole. I think that's fairly simple, and that doesn't need any major reform. So my contribution, Ms. McLean, would be to look at the basic functions of a parliamentary system in a democracy, and I said there are three, and the extent to which there needs to be reform to satisfy that those functions are performed optimally. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Sir George, and it's great to see you. I think your contribution has been well put, and it has been carefully noted. I thank you. Before I go to the next person requesting to speak, there's a comment here from Joy Speed. I'm not sure where Miss Speed is, but she says, please give some background on what Parliament has done and is doing for Bajans across the diaspora. Is there a diaspora committee? In Parliament, I do not know of a diaspora committee. What I can tell you is that within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade for several years, there have been varying initiatives to engage the diaspora and to address various requests and needs of members of the diaspora. For example, issues of returning to Barbados and facilitating that process, engaging them in their various locations, and I believe that, well, I'm not sure, as I said, where you're located, but, and I don't want to spend a lot of time explaining these things because we want to hear from you, but as I said, a lot of work has been spearheaded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and within our various missions, our high commissions and embassies, etc., programs and officers are allocated to, designed and overseen by officers responsible for diaspora matters. And so it is a question of probably looking. So as I said, I do not know of a diaspora committee in Parliament, but at the level of the executive, at the level of cabinet and ministries, that's where issues are operationalized. The other one is a comment from Mr. Tyrone Roach, who I know happens to be in the UK. As he said, there are no honorary consuls in the UK. As to why that is, I am not sure if there were ever requests to do so, and that would need some researching as to the rationale for that. If you are making a case for such, I believe it would be good to hear from you, Mr. Roach, what your thoughts are on that matter at some point before we end. Next person wanting to speak. And let me just say that we are looking here from the table at ourselves, so we are at a little bit of a disadvantage so we rely on you to just go ahead when one speaker has concluded. Again, I would love to hear from somebody from the U.S. So far we haven't, other than Dr. Brown. Okay. Okay. Go ahead. I see her. Thank you. I'm still looking for a signal. Now that I can see the full screen, I'm looking for signals to speak. Go ahead. I am surprised that Barbadians are so quiet. Maybe that's... I'm hearing from one of our members of the audience that you seem to have lost a lot of your Bajan fervor and probably are now adopting the traditions of where you are, but I am sure that there are no major differences. Yes.
Not sure that I feel confident anymore to speak.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Okay, my name is Pam Lowe Hoyt. Hello, cousin Myrna. From Montreal. And,
hello, cousin Pam. Good to see you, love.
Good to see you too. I'm sitting here thinking that given the state of what would pass for Parliament here in the United States, I feel absolutely intimidated about giving any suggestions to Barbados, which appears to be working. Things are getting done, policies are passed. They're solid people in charge. Not that one always agrees with a direction or a particular position, but I don't know. Having lived in America and lived through these past few years, I am absolutely intimidated about making any suggestions for change, particularly to have a flood of folk who are Barbadian to the bone but don't live there start to make changes and suggest policy changes that those who live there have to both implement and live with. So I'm cautious, and that's probably, I don't know, I'm not speaking for all of the Americans on the call, but I am certainly cautious about, okay, let's change. Let me ask a question. Life is about change, but do we see a need for change? Is there an overriding wrong that we have to right?
If I might respond to that, I believe that I wouldn't say that there's any overriding wrong, but I believe, as you can imagine, with any system that is dynamic, there's need for periodic review, and it would not be a case necessarily of changing for change's sake, because in your review, you may in fact establish that there are certain elements of your system, as you were making a comparison with what's happening in the U.S. now, that there may be certain elements of your system which indeed are working and working well, but there may be other areas in which, based on the recommendations, so I think it's not a case, as far as I'm concerned as a commissioner. I'm sure, while I cannot speak for others based on my interaction with my fellow commissioners, I think the assignment given to us is to do a review, and as I said, that is a good thing when you're part of a system that is dynamic. And I believe that when we look at our terms of reference, the juncture that we are at now as a new republic is perhaps a good time to stop and reflect. So hopefully that, Ms. Lohoit, gives you a sense of you know, the rationale behind the assignment that we have been given.
So might we start at the question then? What is there something that needs to be put right?
How should I put it? I think I don't know if it really and truly, I believe no system is perfect. And
Right.
as you look at its elements, you know, you probably will find, and basically what the exercise would also do, it will tell us whether from the perspective of our various stakeholders, that is the citizens of Barbados, whether they're here or you know, like yourself in the overseas, in the diaspora, whether you believe that there are things that we need to look at, whether it be minor changes, leaving as is, or maybe offering some major overhauls. So I think that, to my mind, is how I see it. On Mr. Beckles, is there a comment you want to make in relation to that?
Thank you, Commissioner McLean. I believe that you would have stated it very succinctly, the response to the question. Change is inevitable, but what I would like to focus on in this moment of time is that we have the opportunity, not just us as Barbadians here, physically here in Barbados, but all Barbadians, wherever you may be, at this time, you have the opportunity and the ability to effect change. You have that direct ability to see change that may be packaged in a way that you had some influence over. So I see everyone here on the chat and all Barbadians in the diaspora. I see this opportunity here. I see this as a pivotal moment where all Barbadians can contribute to the direction of the Republic of Barbados. But just allow me, Commissioner McLean, just to invite, I know we have a number of persons who want to comment, but I just want to invite at this time Mr. Wickham, Mr. Peter Wickham. There are some comments that Ambassador Thompson would like to respond to. So I'm going to invite Ambassador Thompson at this time to take the mic.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I really just want to share some information, and then if I may, we have at every session engaged those who have attended. I want to recognize in the room the President of the Senate of Barbados, His Honor Reginald Farley. I want to recognize the former Consul General at New York, Jessica Odell Burrill, the Cabinet Secretary of Barbados, Selma Husbands Green. And online at the moment, we have the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Miss Joyanne Skinner. Just to ask those online, if you would be so kind, please, there are people who were trying to access the Parliament Zoom link and haven't yet been able to do so. Please let them know that we are actually servicing all the streams, not just the Zoom, but the public affairs, the Department of Public Affairs stream. We gather in the Government Information Service, BLP Facebook, BLP YouTube, and Parliament's YouTube, all of which have active participants online and which are and who are posting questions and comments. We are trying to field them, and the moderators or our chairs are answering as they come in. Of course, there is active discussion going on in the chats as well. If I may engage, though, Mr. Wickham, who spoke to the issue of diaspora representative. This is one of the issues that has been raised. I know it was raised very much with the Constitutional Reform Commission when they went to the diaspora, and it is something that has been raised with us. I was unaware, Peter, thank you for letting me know that the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the government of St. Vincent had attempted to address this issue. Of course, the issue of people voting in the diaspora raises three possible issues that have been problematic. In the Eastern Caribbean, there have been concerns about the number of people who come in to the country at election time merely to vote, and whether or not that is the kind of system and process that we would want to duplicate. Second, the size of the diaspora and the fact that people are outside of the country and perhaps not as closely in touch with the issues as those resident in the country, and that their votes could push the result of an election in a particular direction, not necessarily wanted by those resident on the ground who have to live with the consequences of the decision. And the third issue is the mechanism for organizing those in the diaspora to vote if you weren't going to let them come in en masse, as happens in the Eastern Caribbean. In that regard, I have had an idea similar to what you said the Prime Minister of St. Vincent had, that I wanted to throw out today because we do have a diaspora audience. And it is this. I'm going to explain it, and I would like to have the reaction. I just want to make it clear that this is a single idea. That is mine. It is not the position of the Commission. So the Commission is not advocating this. I am using the opportunity to say that as a commissioner, this is an idea that I have. I want to hear the reaction of the diaspora, and the Commission will make its decision on the issue in due course. The idea is that we should allow a diaspora representative. The person will be resident in Barbados, but must have lived outside of Barbados for a minimum of 7 to 10 years, so that they really understand what it is like to live as a Barbadian non-national in a foreign jurisdiction. So it can't be somebody who's gone for 6 months as a student or a year as a student, 7 to 10 years. That person will canvass the diaspora largely electronically, and that they can be voted for by all members of the jurisdiction, all members of the diaspora, irrespective of what jurisdiction they are in. The persons will vote electronically. Now, here we would have to overcome the electronic challenges and ensure the integrity of the system, but it certainly solves the problem of having people come in en masse. It solves the problem of having several representatives all over the place and everybody voting for a large number of people who could skew the results of the national election. They would essentially all be voting for a single representative. That person would then become a member of parliament, and their responsibility will be to look after the interests and concerns of those living in the jurisdiction. So for instance, what is a common problem? Those living overseas who may be building in Barbados and want to be able to have an independent view of what's happening with their contractors or a contract that is broken down. That would be the sort of concern that a diaspora parliamentarian might want to represent, might want to look at. If you were a Barbadian and you felt that there was an interest of some sort of property interest or something that you wanted your diaspora MP to follow up on. So there are a range of issues that persons in the diaspora have, and this parliamentary representative, one, would be able to deal with those. And I'm interested in hearing what your reactions to this would be, whether they're positive, negative, if you have anything to add or take away from this suggestion, and that is all it is, a suggestion as being put, or whether you would like to see it tweaked in a different way. And since Mr. Wickham raised this online, I should like to hear from him first, but I know that there are other people who are going to be keen to react, because the issue of voting rights for the Barbadian diaspora has been one which has been long mooted and long sought after. So I am going to pause here to hear Mr. Wickham's reaction and the reaction of others, if in fact others want to engage on the topic.
Yeah. Ambassador Thompson, thanks for the opportunity, and I certainly will, just make a very quick response and to say that I do like the idea of the diaspora representative that you put forward. I think it addresses the issue of giving the diaspora the opportunity to have an input. It also addresses the concern about the imbalance that can be created by having large numbers of persons voting locally, even though they reside externally. And I think it also gives us the opportunity to open up the pool in St. Kitts and Nevis. Persons who are resident overseas vote, but they have to travel to St. Kitts and Nevis. If we have something like your system, that's their control. But if we have something like your system that's being proposed, persons can vote, via the internet. They can vote at embassies. They can vote via various media that would allow them the opportunity to participate in a larger scale without the cost of travel, and it still does not have a negative impact on the system. So the idea of one seat in the lower house, based on for persons in the diaspora, is an idea that I would totally support, and I think it does make a lot of sense. So I'm anxious to hear what the diaspora community thinks about it.
Thanks very much, and we look forward to hearing from you and responding to the proposal and the earlier contribution of Mr. Wickham.
We have in the chat Miss Judy Hudson. You have the floor at this time.
So good afternoon, everyone. I live in New York City. I've gotten my citizenship through my parents. I come to Barbados regularly, so that is my second home. And I agree with what was just said. I think that well, first of all, I think the most important thing that Barbados needs to always have is opposition party. You need to be able to have always a check and balance, whatever. I mean, I don't understand the parliamentary system exactly, But whatever that system, it should always have an opposition party, because I think there always needs to be a check and balance. Because in the Western world right now, we're seeing so many countries that are turning autocratic. And a lot of them had democratic parties, but it was just abolished. And I would hate to see that happen to Barbados. I would hate to see outside influences come into Barbados. So I think it's a great idea for a representative to represent the diaspora. But if you had an opposition party, I would think that the diaspora should be represented by one person from each of those parties, so it gives a balance. Also, I believe that I agree. I don't think people for the diaspora should have more of a say, especially for the people who are living in Barbados, who you would see things differently that people outside would not understand, not living day to day in Barbados. And you have to be careful of outside influence money also trying to control Barbados votes. With the US system, you have expatriates that vote outside, but they cannot have outside money that works with the expatriates when they're voting. There's only that you cannot have outside money to contribute to the donation. So I think Barbados should have something like that you cannot have outside money from diaspora influence the vote of Barbados through the representative, whoever represents the diaspora. And I want to thank you for letting me talk. I'm done.
Well, thank you very much, and we're happy to hear your contribution, and we look forward to your continued support of the work that we're doing. As you might be aware, we do have a number of persons with us, and I want to recognize here with us in this room the former president of C2SAB, Mr. Edwin O'Neill, who has been actively following what we've been doing as a commission, and has in fact made a submission to the commission. And on that note, I would want to remind our audience that in addition to sharing your thoughts with us, you can also submit your comments in writing to the address you see there, prc@barbadosparliament.com. And we look forward to receiving your thoughts and ideas. Okay, over to you, Corey. I believe we have someone else who wants to speak.
Thank you, Commissioner McLean. I see Mr. Joseph Codrington. Do you want to make a comment?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Give me a second, please. Yeah, I grew up in Barbados. I never voted. And then I live in Michigan. And just recently, 2008, voted for the first time in my life. So I do not, and I think this is why there's some reticence in not being able to hear from diaspora people here in the U.S. If they're like me, I don't know how Parliament works or anything. I just knew it was there. I never participated, so I didn't know that. But being here for a number of years now, I pay a keen interest and observance in what's going on in Barbados, because at some point in time, I plan to be in Barbados. That's the goal. So I would like to be involved in something like this and be able to vote. I like the ideas that were put forward, but I think the reticence in terms of people in this environment coming forward and saying, I want to vote. I sent out something to maybe 30 friends that live here. They're all from Barbados and they live in various parts of the US. I don't see any of them on here, but I sent something to them. And I got one response that said, I don't trust the political system in Barbados. So they didn't come on. So there's, I think, having a representative that could disseminate information that they can look at electronically to kind of keep them informed what's going on in Barbados. We are following, we know Barbados is doing, but do we know the everyday workings and how it goes? Are we influenced by what we saw as youngsters growing up and don't really know what's going on now that we're adults? Because that was me. And so I think you're getting the reticence or the hesitation in someone from the U.S. who's part of the diaspora coming forward and saying something or speaking. So at this point, I'm observing, listening, checking into everything, and we'll make some moves from there based on when we establish a person that's a representative, and be quite glad to go on electronically and vote for whoever is doing what's right in Barbados. And that's my piece.
Thank you, Mr. Codrington. I was quick to suggest that you can follow what happens in Parliament in Barbados. The Parliament of Barbados has a website, and you can actually follow live debates in both the House of Assembly and the Senate. Traditionally, the House of Assembly meets on Tuesdays, and the Senate meets on Wednesdays, but they may alter those days depending on the exigencies of what they're debating. But you can also identify you know, the legislative agenda, because they will have what the order paper spelling out what has to be debated, and you can also go back and look at all debates. So I encourage you, as you've indicated, you're paying more attention now to what's happening, to maybe follow some of those debates, which will help you to understand some of the issues of the day. Over to Corey for...
Honorary Counsel Glenn Clark, High Commissioner Glenn Clark is with us. You have the floor, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon to the commissioners, to my good friends, Sir Richard and Sir Roy, and of course, Liz and Maxine McLean. I want to say you all are doing a very good job, and I believe that there are many people who are following you online. However, there are so many, like the last caller, who sometimes do not want to participate in the process. And of course, I want to remind all Barbadians that we were given the right to vote some years ago, which our great-grandparents fought for and really enjoyed. But in recent times, several persons do not exercise that right. And of course, the question is, how do we get our people to participate? I think in any democracy where you have less than 50% of the vote, it's a crying shame on that system. And we need, first of all, to see how do we get more persons come out to vote. In some systems, I understand, Australia, you have compulsory persons have to come out and exercise their franchise. I think we need to look at, if we do not have that system, how we have to find a way and get into more and more people to participate in the poll. That's my first look at it. Secondly, I want to say that the question of first past the post system that has been in place for a long time is still a good system. It is a fair system. I do not subscribe to the view of former, I think it was someone mentioned it today. I heard it. I don't remember who it was, but I think first past the post system is still a good system. However, proportional representation can be encouraged. For example, we now have 30 seats in Parliament. If we say we continue with the first past the post system with that 30, and then allocate an additional 5 for those in a mixture of proportional representation, I believe that can answer the question of how do you continue to promote democracy given those persons who do not have, or the parties that do not have a seat. And of course, as you know, in Parliament, we do not recognize parties. We recognize
there's no space in here, right?
Constituencies. We represent persons, so that the proportional representation we'll have to.
But definitely invite me. I would love to do that. And I know your pastor, and it's fine. I know Dave.
Someone is on the line. We'll have to look at a sort of mixture between first past the poll and proportional representation for an additional 5 seats, where you can divide that seat to the political parties that have some form of percentage basis that can be worked out. My second point is this. I noticed that in recent times, and I like the idea that since 2018, the present government introduced a financial committee system at the estimates. I think this is very important. This helps to encourage more participation by the persons in the civil service. However, I want to see the public, I want to see more involvement in the financial system of government. How do we provide a committee where persons can come and make representation? I think the committee system can work, and it should be encouraged to do more. We can do it, we can have it maybe 3 or 4 times a year. For example, in terms of permission of planning permission that can be discussed in Parliament. We can discuss things like acquisition of property, where that has been a problem over the years. I think you need to have a standing committee throughout the year, to meet on a regular basis to discuss a number of proposals by government, either giving out of contracts, of housing development, acquisition of properties, or something of the sort. I also believe that right now it is fair to say that Parliament meets. I will have to ask Pedro to tell me how many times Parliament meets on average every year. I think it used to be 40 times or 45 times per year. I'm not sure. I think this may very well be adequate. May very well be adequate if it's going to meet 45 times. I know in some years it didn't meet as much, but I think we need to set a deadline or a sort of average how many times the Parliament is supposed to meet. And my final suggestion is, in terms of diaspora, I like the idea that was raised by Ambassador Thompson, the diaspora representation. I think we need to have diaspora representation. I've raised this matter before. It was found on, but I think we need to look at, not necessarily one, Liz. I think we need to have at least 2 of them, one for North America and one for Europe and Africa maybe. But again, I believe I would not necessarily put the diaspora representation in the Parliament. I think we can put them in the Senate and the Commission and the committee. The whole notion of how do you appoint senators can be looked at. I think, as you know, 21 can go from 21 to 23, where you have a diaspora representation in the Senate. So those are my take on it. I also believe that giving parliamentarians more resources is important. I served in Parliament for over 25 years, as you know, and I noticed that we were able to give representation, more allowances to parliamentarians in terms of office staff, office, and so on. I think we need to do more of that. I think parliamentarians should be a full-time job as well. Once you're elected to Parliament, then you should, I believe you should hold your job until you until you agree to come out of Parliament. But I think parliamentarians, the way it is now, if you want to serve Parliament, your constituency properly, I think it should be a full-time job, and your resources should be accordingly given. So those are my take on it. I will make a written submission to the panel in due course. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner Clark. And I would just want to speak to one of the points you made about members of parliament. And there was a question raised by Rue Maynard, and the comment was some MPs continue to engage in professional/careers after being elected. Is there some protection in place to ensure that MPs are not in conflict or gain some benefit from inside knowledge and relationship? I will speak more to the first part of the comment to indicate that as it is right now, parliamentarians, members of parliament, are not full-time, except you are appointed to the cabinet. So the notion of full-time parliamentarian was just raised by High Commissioner Clark, and that is something, as he indicated, he certainly is going to be writing, I presume, will speak to that. But that's an issue, Ms. or Mr. Maynard, that we have flagged here as an issue to be contemplated. I want at this time to welcome and acknowledge the presence of Ambassador Noel Lynch, who's our ambassador to the United States and representative to the Organization of American States. And also, I believe online is Ambassador Tanika Seeley Thompson, ambassador to Brazil. And I know that Ambassador Lynch had indicated earlier he wanted to speak around 2 o'clock. So I invite him to join us and share his thoughts. And then we are making a list of others who have signaled their interest in speaking. Okay. Oh, it's okay. I see. I thought I'd been told that he was there. He's not there yet. Okay. On that note, I believe that Mr. Beckles has a list, so I'll hand over to him.
I saw online Honorary Consul Dr. Myrna Lashley. You have the floor. Yes, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beckles. I just want to speak to what Sir George and my cousin, Dr. Lowe Hoyt, said about the commission. And I think it's something that maybe you need to clarify. There are those who are of the opinion that this commission will automatically lead to some type of reform, when in fact, as I understand it, we're doing a review, and that review may mean that there's very little to change. That's the nature of reviews. That there is nothing that will be changed. We may find that you may find that everything is in order. And therefore, I think it's important for persons to understand that, because there may be those who think that by having this input, that what they say will be done. And I think we need to emphasize that, in fact, what we're doing here is a review, and that it's not necessarily going to lead to all the changes that people may or may not want. For me, that's extraordinarily important. I also want to say that, as I have indicated, that I certainly agree with Mr. Wickham. You do not want to have, for the want of a better word, outsiders dominating the political process of those who live within the country. I do not feel, I live outside, and I do not feel that I should have the same say as those who live in the country with the everyday circumstances and vicissitudes which one has to face. So I certainly agree with having a representative, but that representative, as has been stated, should live within Barbados to represent the diaspora. But even that has issues. I don't know if that person is how you're going to set it so that that person can really represent all the different issues which are going to be brought up, and the personalities and the demands. As far as what High Commissioner Clark just said, is something he said has been bothering me for a while, and that is the permanency of people's employment when they become MPs. I don't believe in part-time MPs. I do believe that when you become an MP, that is your job, and whatever funds you have should be put in trust. Someone else should be running your business. You should not be doing it, because we run the risk of people using the necessity to make a living by using inside information to promote themselves. Pay people a decent salary, have it be a full-time job, put their assets in trust, in a blind trust, let someone else manage their affairs until such time as they decide to leave Parliament or they are unelected by the populace. And therefore, I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Lashley. We have Dr. Brown, Honorary Consul in Houston, Texas.
Well, I had actually taken my hand down because the question and consideration that I had was presented by Mr. Clark, which was my concern, and I do agree with the concept of having a representative. That actually answers the question I had earlier, or the suggestion. My only issue with, or the question I had, it was really a consideration, was essentially exactly what Mr. Clark said. That was the volume of people that are abroad. I'm pretty sure there are more Bajans abroad than there are in Barbados. And how do you handle that? The logistical challenges for that, to represent literally thousands and thousands of Barbadians abroad, that would be, I see it, a great challenge. And that's really what I was going to bring. That was my question. I think I don't have an answer for it at this point, but I think it's something that we have to really give consideration to, because I am sure that there'll be issues with respect to what someone wants to be presented or how they want to be represented as opposed to others. I do like the idea of more than one representative, even if it's, as was said earlier, for USA, England, etc., or Britain or Europe. Anyway, that was what I wanted to say, and as I said, I got my fire was kind of toned down a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw Ambassador Seeley Thompson, the ambassador to Brazil. I believe you had your hand raised. All right. Right. So at this time, I want to just mention a comment that was placed in the chat. There are many of my friends who are in their early 30s and have recently gained their Barbadian citizenship. They would like to have more of an input in the governance of Barbados in order to safeguard their future. There have been many changes in the Western world, and many young people in the diaspora are considering a future at home in Barbados. I see this as a very important comment. We have a number, as said in this contribution, we have a number of young persons in the diaspora who are considering a future at home in Barbados. And I would like to hear from those younger persons in the diaspora. I hope that there are some represented in this session, in this Zoom session. But I would love to hear some younger persons from the diaspora. How do you see, what do you want to see as relates to parliamentary reform in the Barbadian Republic moving forward?
Thank you, and I believe that we are now joined by Ambassador Noel Lynch, so I invite you, sir, to share your thoughts with us.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, well, good afternoon to everyone that's joined. I see a lot of familiar faces, and therefore I feel very comfortable and at home. Let me start by saying that I thought long and hard, and even consulted with a number of people about whether or not I should even make this intervention. That is because I still see myself in pretty much of a government role, or a quasi-government type role, and therefore I wondered how my thoughts would be construed by those who hold the reins of political power and governmental power at this time. But just let me say, I thank you all for the opportunity for having convened this meeting and for giving those in the exterior, members of the diaspora, this important opportunity to contribute. Now, let me start first by saying that I have watched carefully how Barbados has gone since the 2018 election, with one party holding all of the seats. And that repeated in what it was, Peter can tell me, I see Peter there, that was repeated when in 2021, 3 years later.
2021, yes.
2021, right?
Yeah.
With the same party holding all 30 seats again. And I think it is about time that we may have to review the issue of the first past the post system. For one thing, even though you can argue that in a pure democracy that the people have voted for that party, I think we still got to be careful, in my opinion, about how in an evolving democracy, how this is evolving. Now, if you have all these seats in Parliament, it means that I learned in political science sometime years ago that your opposition becomes ex-parliamentum. So almost everybody in the society becomes your opposition. So whether that's the church, whether that's the civil service, whether that is the envoys overseas, I don't care who it is, somebody becomes your opposition. And I believe that the shortcomings of the first past the post system is that the number of seats won by the party usually obviously does not coincide with the popular vote of the populace. And therefore, there was an example, I think even before the Barbados Labour Party won all the seats, I think in the 1999 election, and again, Peter Wickham can correct me, I think the Democratic Labour Party got 35% of the vote and got 2 seats. I think there were only 2 seats that they got in the parliament at the time. Prime Minister Thompson. In 99. Sounds like right. It's 99. And the usual alternative for first post is obviously proportional representation. And I think it's about time that we start looking at the concept of proportional representation. And this is not everybody walking about with a briefcase claiming to be a political party that will get an opportunity to be in there, to be in Parliament. I think it has got to be with a minimum number of votes. You are entitled to some seats. In other words, a minimum. So we can have 16 political parties in Barbados and everybody walking around the place believing that they should get a seat simply because they have been adopted as a political party. Now, I believe it's somewhere in Israel or somewhere where they've got so many seats, so many parties that it really makes a mockery of the concept of proportional representation. But proportional representation to the point where you must get a minimum number of votes for your party to be entitled to a seat. And we can, the brains that are bigger and better than mine can sort through. The major drawback, obviously, of proportional representation is that, again, you get some people, for example, as I said, like in the Israeli parliament, I think there's 13 parties holding seats. Now, there's another jurisdiction in the Commonwealth, I think it is New Zealand or one of them places where there's a mix of both proportional representation and first past the post. So what would happen is that you have a system of national MPs and you kind of have 2 ballots. So this is what happens. I vote for the person who represents my constituency, but at the same time, I also can cast a vote for a number of people that the parties can put up who are not, these people are not linked to a constituency per se, but they have a say and they will be in Parliament, and every party puts up their people, and then based on the number of votes that you get, then you can determine the proportion of how these people are put into the Parliament. Now, I believe that we have long passed the day when I guess the Westminster system has worked well for us, but I think we have now created we can now come to a situation where we need to think more clearly about how we're dealing with it in a small jurisdiction. As a former MP, I can also tell you that I also believe that the Barbados needs more seats. My opinion is that Barbados needs more seats. The personal touch needed to represent a constituency in Barbados and in small jurisdictions demands a lot out of your time, and particularly in a situation where you must be a member of the legislature to be a member of the executive. I believe we've also passed that as well. Because this is what happens. You become a member of parliament, you become a minister of government, and people claim they don't see you, you don't represent them well, they don't get enough of your time, that kind of situation. I believe we have now reached the point where we must need to start looking at getting people in the executive that are outside of the legislature. And therefore, a certain number of cabinet positions can be given to people who are not in the legislature, but appointed obviously by the prime minister and by her, by him or her, their government. We also need, in my opinion, to really look at expanding and using more seriously the parliamentary committee system. Including people who are non-elected members of parliament. I've always felt that you bring in a appropriations bill to parliament, and only those that are in the parliament really have a say in how the appropriations bill goes. And I believe that there are expanded roles for people who have particular professions within our society that should have a role. And therefore, again, that tallies back to what I'm talking about, the proportional representation of the national MPs. The parties can then pick people who are, for example, an accountant, an engineer. Shouldn't some of these people have a say over issues that are going on in the country, but are not necessarily tied to a constituency? These people can serve in the executive. You don't have to be a member of the legislature to serve in the executive. The committee system can also be used more broadly to ensure that when we, I don't like 100% the United States system where every single person that is appointed to every single position in government literally ends up in front of a committee. Some of them is just a passing through. But I do believe that more people need to have a say in the appointment of senior officials in our country outside of just maybe the prime minister and the leader of the opposition. Although sometimes even that doesn't work the way which it's supposed to work. I believe that we have now expanded the role of the appointment of judges. I believe that that even though the prime minister does have the final say, that judges are now subjected to having to apply, having to go through a committee or a system to be chosen. There's also a need for us to look at another way of strengthening our democracy is to provide an ongoing citizen participation for us in government. It is simply not enough to cast a ballot every 5 years. I think there are several mechanisms all over the world that you can utilize. Issues of recall, for example. If you are not representing my interests well, I believe there should be some system for me to be able, during the intermittent period, during the period of the 5 years, for me to come back to the electorate, to be able to say, listen, John Brook, Peter Wickham is not a good MP. I don't see him at all. He don't serve me well. He don't do anything. Or no electorate for that matter. It doesn't only have to be Peter Wickham. And that it is about time that we find a system of recall to be able to say that this person is thing. And let me say, there are several mechanisms. Modern technology is also can also easily facilitate this. And I'll say one other thing. The holding public officials to account must be at the heart of what we do in this democracy. You can't just, because we need serious civil service reform. But apart from that, if we, all officials must be held to account at a higher standard than we have now, both public officials and those that are elected. Transforming the public service, I believe, will be a great point. That may be more of a constitutional issue than a parliamentary issue, but I think it's an important issue. I will stop there. I don't know if any of what I've said has made sense, but I believe it is left to those in power to deal with the issues as they see fit. I'll stop there and cede the floor to someone else.
Thank you very much.
All for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Lynch. And based on your initial comments, where you signal a bit of a hesitation, and you mentioned that I think your words were that you still see yourself pretty much as a government. Since this is on the record, I would want to perhaps indicate to our audience that my understanding is that you're speaking in a personal capacity, because, or do you want me to take it as official? No, I don't think, I am sure you were speaking in a personal capacity.
If I may, madam, there's one thing I neglected to say though. One of the things too that I am really concerned about is this bicameral system that we have. I believe that the Senate has now become, I served in the Senate with Sir Roy and Ambassador Thompson is serving in the Senate, and people that may be on this call. It has become too much of a rubber stamp for the lower house of government. And therefore, I am moving, the jury is still out in my head, but I am moving towards a unicameral system. I can't get it into my head that people end up in this place where you have, this neo-colonial anachronism that is the Senate. I really think we need to be able to look past that. Barbados needs more seats in the parliament, because that way you give more of the personal touch that I'm talking about. And also, you get more of an opportunity to get more people in. Barbados we need about 40 seats, maybe 45 seats in our parliament, because we just don't have enough people to be able to deal with the issue. And I believe if you are able to do that, I can see, Barbados' democracy growing and improving. But that's where I am. And Ms. McLean, you can take that as a personal comment and not one coming from any government official.
Thank you very much, sir. And with that, I will call on Ambassador Tanika Seeley Thompson, our ambassador in Brazil, to share her thoughts with us.
Thank you so much. Good evening, good afternoon to everybody. I'm very happy to be a part of this conversation and to hear all of the contributions. I hope to make an intervention at the intersection of the issue of youth representation, diaspora representation, and how those might be linked to the strategic role that Parliament might have as the legislature of the country. And I'm not sure that what I have to say is so much about the structure of Parliament as it is about a way in which I imagine that the ambitions that we would have articulated through initiatives like the gathering can be effectively achieved should there be some kind of structural mechanism for engaging with the diaspora. So the first thing is a comment that was made to me by one of my colleagues, so I have to thank and acknowledge him for that, which is we need, if we are to move towards having permanent or some kind of diaspora representative in Parliament, to make the very clear distinction between what is diaspora and what is a descendant community. Certainly in the case of Brazil, when I was preparing for this meeting and wanting to gather people together, I thought of bringing together people who live in Brazil but are Barbadians for pretty clear reasons. One, the very simple fact of being able to follow along in English. But then it occurred to me that there's so many people in the community who don't necessarily speak English, but who are very interested and engaged on this topic, and indeed who want to make a contribution to the development of, and to engaging with Barbados and Barbados's future writ large. So making that distinction in the role and making sure that there is some attention given to this question of the descendants of Barbados who live in non-English speaking territories. And in that regard, I wanted to raise or put back on the table the question, or suggest perhaps that one of the things that such a representative, should that find favor with a new structure, one of the things that person would have to pay attention to is the fact of there being a very healthy non-English speaking diaspora who have questions like which generation of descendants get to have a say. And I'm not sure where we are with that discussion, please forgive me, but it felt like an opportune moment to raise that. I have descendants who are now in the 6th and 7th generation who want to engage with Barbados, but obviously would require a fairly heavy set of facilitation in that they've lost the ability to speak English. But in my view, and those of you who know me have heard me harp on about this over the years, that it is an opportunity for Barbados to bring back and to move forward with a more international view of itself. But I won't belabor that point. I was sitting with a young woman who is a student. She was a former student, and we were being fed by a young woman who was a former student here in Brazil. They were both scholarship winners. They are Barbadians, and they speak fluent Portuguese, and they speak fluent English, obviously being Barbadians, and who are terribly interested in what's going on at home. And they were following along. I had to bid one of them goodbye, but they are interested in the extent to which they are able to vote. For example, one of the young women said to me that she's never been able to vote since she's been living in Brazil. And so I put that on the table. Again, it might be my assumption that perhaps the mechanism for that is not something that I am familiar with, but certainly this question of making sure that the youth abroad who are not in North America and who don't live in English-speaking territories are also accounted for and seen as assets, not just to the construction of the decision-making bodies of Barbados, but also as, entities that can be strategically deployed in favor of what we hope to do with our foreign partners. And in that regard, I wanted to mention that, students in general, and I've been talking about this since I was younger, and now I'm not so much youth, but I like to think that I have a dialogue and a healthy dialogue with the youth. It's an area that I'm passionate about as an ambassador, but also as a teacher at heart. And one of the things that I learned, or in preparing, as I said, for this process and engaging with the young people that I did talk to, is that they feel like they want a mechanism to know that, there's some flow through from winning a scholarship, moving overseas, being a person who's still interested in Barbados, and being able to have a voice. And so whether that is a diaspora representative, whether that is a youth representative, or whether diaspora and youth are seen as transversal issues for all representatives, I'm not sure about the structure, but I just wanted to bring the perspective of Brazil. It doesn't take a lot to think about what Brazil and Barbados have in we have so much going on for each other bilaterally, but also as we stand in the world at this time. And the youth dimension of our diaspora, as it were, and also the descendant dimension merit attention, without me trying to predict what format that would take. And I just wanted to greet everybody with those comments, and thank you for giving me the floor.
Ambassador Silly Thompson, thanks very much. My name is Richard Ishmael, and this is William Chandler. We'll be chairing the next hour or so session. As you can hear, I have a bit of a laryngitis, so Dr. Chandler will take over the lead over the next hour or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ishmael. And good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, night, evening to everybody. I hope you're having a most salubrious day. Let me first start off by letting you know that you can attend Parliament online if you want. You can watch it on the Parliament's website. You can watch Parliament on YouTube via Parliament's YouTube channel. You can also watch Parliament via various social media channels, including some political parties and the Government Information Service. So really and truly, wherever you are in the world, Parliament is right there at your fingertips. I regularly watch Parliament online, actually, and it's quite entertaining from time to time, especially some of the things that go on in the Senate, even though some people think that the Senate is a rubber stamp. So with that said, let me just read out a few of the comments made in the Zoom chat that we missed, especially those that are responding to Ambassador Lynch. One person said, I concur with Ambassador Lynch on the right to recall as part of the Constitution. Another person said, I am listening intently to the conversation and I must ask, what is the real purpose of this forum in terms of parliamentary reform when there has been no discussion on the ties to the old colonial norms and procedures? Is there any intention to move away from the UK-themed rules and etiquettes that no longer are of importance to our new republic? Asking for friends of the diaspora. Well, really and truly, it's for you in the diaspora to be able to tell us what you want to see. So if you want us to move away completely from norms and procedures that you think are antiquated or shouldn't be in place in Barbados, then you have to come on the chat and let us know. All of these questions that you have in your head, well, many people in Barbados currently have in their minds, and we are here to hear your actual suggestions. In terms of the first question, it also corresponds with what Sir George was saying in terms of the nature of us becoming a republic and the extent to which the parliamentary system is intertwined with becoming a republic. Some people will say that the nature of the republic does not correspond with the parliamentary system, and the parliamentary system is completely distinct. But let's just remember that the parliamentary system responds to the country itself and what we've chosen for ourselves. So to the extent that Parliament operated under a monarch, the reality was that even Parliament itself belonged to the monarchs. The courts belong to the monarch. The government itself, the cabinet, belonged to the monarch. What we have now today are all of these branches of government now belonging directly to the people of Barbados, which is a great distinction, and it's why we have the reform process today, not just with parliamentary reform, but constitutional reform. With that said, is there anyone else who wants to speak at this time?
Hello.
Hi, good day. Could you please say your name and proceed?
Hi, my name is Angela Johnson. I am calling in from Michigan. My concern here in terms of the reform for governance, I would like to know along the lines, since Barbados has, or from the sense that government is involved in every day-to-day operation, including healthcare, what are some of the proposals, if any, at this time with regards to concerns about affordable or accessible health care? For those of us living abroad, for example, we are used to going to doctor's offices, being seen timely, even if we go to a hospital. What are some of the things that would encourage us that if we have to come back home, that those things will be, are being considered at this time?
Well, really and truly, your question, though not entirely on parliamentary reform, does speak to some suggestions that were made before about a committee system for Parliament that can address questions like yours. Is there another person who wants to ask a question? I see someone with iPad 3 with a hand up.
Yes, that's myself. I'm calling from London, England. And my question is...
And what's myself's name?
My name is Rick.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. I lived in Barbados up until 1993, so I've been away a while. And for the few times I've been back, you know, there's been a terrific amount of changes to the country, which is always good to see. It's progress and it's done well. And I'm very happy to see it's now become a republic. One of the things I would say is, when I heard to the previous comments about, if you've got a parliamentary system that have served the people and worked well, the old adage where it says if it's not broken, there's no need to fix it, although modifications can always help. But the real question I want to ask you is when I was living in Barbados, it always struck to me the integrity of politicians. We've heard of politicians getting themselves in hot water and indeed having to spend time in prison and so on and so forth. What can be done about a parliamentary system where you have a register where ministers are obligated to note down and record any conflict of interest, and this is all parliamentarians, and a certain code of behavior or practices, and whereby if these codes are breached, they are subject to be recalled by the constituents to step away from the limelight, being a minister, a backbencher, a parliamentarian, if they break the code of conduct as far as ministers and politicians are obligated to assign to once they become a member of parliament. It's always been a concern when I lived there that, people would say that you would see a politician turn up for election time and then disappear. I'm not saying that that's the case now, but this would be an added protection to ensure that when people hear about these things happening, there's a level of transparency from politicians, and also we get politicians of the highest integrity beyond reproach. Is there any reforms that can cover that as far as things stand at the moment?
One thing I love about Barbadians is that they often ask questions but make statements at the same time. So I think in the questions you were asking, you were really suggesting the things that you want to see. Let me just say as well that over the last few months, we passed the Integrity and Public Life Act in Barbados, which will at some point be proclaimed and address many of the things that you're asking for there. For the record, I am going to note that many of those questions that you put to us just now had nuggets that we can take on as propositions to be able to intertwine in our conversations for reform. Let me also note that, interestingly, I was looking up that quote today about if it's not broken, don't fix it. And like many of these adages that we have in the world, they often are shortened versions of longer sayings, and this one actually goes towards the historical reality that sometimes you find governments fixing things that do not need fixing, and then leaving things broken that do need fixing. So in this case, there was a question before about whether we need parliamentary reform at all. And the thing is, we are doing a review, but to the extent that we become a republic, there are going to be some things that will need to be changed to better reflect the Barbadian populace. Even that conversation that we're having right now about the participation of the diaspora is of extreme importance. Think about it this way. We had a situation in the constitutional monarchy where someone born somewhere else had more of a say than Barbadians living abroad, and that person was actually the head of state. So we've removed that person, and now we're having this conversation about the diaspora having full participation or some participation in the parliamentary system. If we were to leave the system entirely as it is, then the diaspora would have no say at all, and we would end up with them having even less of a say than past monarch of Barbados who was from somewhere else. I see someone else with the name S having your hand up, or sir, did you want to speak again? I see your hand up.
Sure. Yes, my name is Sam Clark, and I'm calling from Brooklyn, New York. I'm calling with regard to the diaspora rights to vote, right? Many of administration have come to New York and proclaimed that they will recognize our right to vote. Governments came and governments went, and nothing has been done. In this new constitution, would it be imperative that that we in the diaspora have this right to vote? I mean, Barbados is a country that had, over 350 years of parliamentary democracy, right? And a country like Afghanistan came on the scene for 20 years of democracy, and Afghanis could vote all over the world. So if we have such a system, why is it not that they just blow back and people making statements about being dominated by outsiders, when in fact the diaspora contribute tremendously financially to Barbados GDP, right? all right? So I don't understand when people make those kind of statements, pure red herrings, because if you're going to say and others, oh, we can't have the right to vote because it might be some kind of skullduggery. Well, no, we have consulates here that do great work in and renewing our documents, etc. So there's nothing wrong with us having an easy vote. It's easily done. I don't understand why there's this pushback by some there outside interference. There's not outside interference. We have just as much right, and we do businesses there in Barbados. So it's very important that we play an integral part in the development and the continued development of Barbados. So I am very strong proponent of the diaspora having the right to vote, and also that the recall of elected officials. Also, everything you talk about the transparency legislation, good step. Got to go a little further though. It must be not for a commission to look. It must be public to go and see anytime they need. That's my 2 cents in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you for your 2 cents. It's hitting like $1. So with that said, let me ask you this question. How do you see the diaspora voting working? Like, how would you envisage it working literally on the ground?
The same way we can go to the consulate, like how Americans wherever in the world go to the consulate or designated area or wherever to vote with the same ballot. If you say I came from St. James or St. Philip, whatever, and you're registered to that constituency, then you are quite able to vote for that person in that constituency that where you're hailing from. This is a simple process. This is not rocket science. This is not reinventing the wheel.
So what happens then if the constituency of the diaspora that says it hails from St. Philip is larger than the entire population living in St. Philip? What do you do then?
What the point is not about it being larger or other. If you're registered to a constituency, and then you could vote for that constituency. It happens now if you're living there and in a constituency, they got bigger constituencies than others. They're big or small. And the ambassador made a very good, interesting point that there's a need for more constituencies in Barbados because he really cannot cover the bases and serve those people the constituency. So that could be amended too as well. You know, I'm all good for that, but I'm saying this is an easy fix to allow us to vote. Simple. So there's no logistical nightmare.
I hear you about that logistical nightmare being a dream of yours. So this is my last question to you, which is, how do you feel about there being this one representative for the entire diaspora?
No, you can't have one representative. The diaspora is too big. How the diaspora, you have like...
But I thought you said size doesn't really matter, it's just the principle.
Wait. I'm talking about increasing. You're asking me about one representative. I want more than one representative for diaspora. There's a suggestion made that one could be for Europe, one for America, and South America or whatever it is. But the point is you can have a regional, say one for Europe, one for North America, or 2 for North America, one for Canada, and one for the United States. Something like that. But don't come and say that, oh, it's too big. Maybe Barbados is bigger than that. It's time enough that this should have been done a long time ago. There was nothing that was stopping this other than political machinization. We should have been voting a long time. You make Afghanistan come and make us look like shabbiness, and we continue to say that we are this paragon of democracy. Come on, give us a break.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you for your passion. Let me also say that to the best of my knowledge, no one has gone and promised the diaspora the ability to vote. But even if they did...
No. I'm going to correct you there, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm saying I have been at many meetings here of various elected officials coming to New York. I'm promising the diaspora, oh, yes, we can get you a right to vote and we can work on it. Oh, then they'll say, oh, we didn't have enough vote. We got to get 2/3 majority. Now there's no 2/3 majority. There's a total majority. So what's the excuse now? There are no excuses. What is the excuse? That's what I'm saying. There's no excuse. And I'm passionate about it because we've been fed this story too long and being put up there all the time and never, ever follow through.
And sir, may I ask a question? If you
Sure,
do
man.
not, if you do not have a home or business in Barbados, what constituency are you going to vote in?
Wait. You saying to me, if you came from, let's care for St. Helena Estates, and you moved to Australia or New Zealand, right? And that is still your mailing address, and whatever you do is connected to that. And you have family there, you support them there, you buy stuff there, you have businesses there, as many in the diaspora do, going back and forth, right? That's where you come from, where you were born. If you choose to say, I was born in Black Rock, that should be your place, and you choose to have Black Rock as your domicile, so be it.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I now feel what Mr. Wickham feels on a regular basis on the recalling programs. I thank you a lot, though. I really appreciate it. I see, Rick, you have your hands up. Would you like to speak now? Oh, so Rick, you didn't take down your hand and you have yourself muted. Did you actually want to speak, or should I just go on to the next person?
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry, this technology is a bit new to me. What I was saying is that you're right about some sayings being shortened versions. What I was saying is, if the principle of the parliamentary system have served you and worked well, yes, there are modifications because we live in different times. We live in a time of technology. 50 years ago, we wouldn't be able to do this. 50 years ago, we would have to put a pen to paper and write to each other, or pick the phone up and call each other. But we have this technology now that brings us close together, i.e. I'm in London and you're in Barbados. But one other thing I would like to add is that if you're going to bring forward this parliamentary bill, make sure it is fit for purpose and not left with a lot of lingering loopholes to make the whole thing untenable. And that is the only concern about your rebuttal to myself, is that when you bring forward this integrity bill that you just mentioned, that it is fit for purpose and it effectively bring to light. And what I was talking about is a member's register. So any conflict of interest, they have to know it down. I.e., if they're a minister for a certain department and they take a gratuity or whatever, they have to note it down. And if it break the rules, then they are subject to scrutiny and they have to take responsibility. And that means that they're expelled from the party or the parliament. Then they have to go back to the people, and the people will decide whether this person is fit to represent them going forward. That's all I wanted to say. I'll take my hand down if it's still up. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, no problem. You're welcomed. Your hand is down now, so you're good. Are there any
Great stuff.
Are there any more people who would like to speak right now? Before I go to read some more of the comments. In the meantime, let me just read another comment. Mr. Adrian Hines, not Adrian Clark, the Calypsonian, sorry for that. Parliamentarians must return to be a constituency representative first and foremost. All other representatives, be they lawyers or consultants, have running conversations with their clients. So it must be that a parliamentary representative must occasionally return to the people for their views on pending legislation and seek their views and understanding on it and vote in Parliament accordingly. You also said the political party whip is too strong in Parliament. Ambassador Lynch seems to have been smitten by the American system. In that regard, let's also note that currently, or there's a notion that the Constitution of Barbados does not recognize political parties. There's recognition of political parties in parts of the law, but not a holistic capturing within the framework. I know this is something that also captures Mr. Wickham's attention, and they may capture some of the attention of some others here. To the extent that there have been some comments at various town halls about political parties, it would be good to have some sort of idea from the diaspora about what you feel should be done with political parties within the parliamentary system here. Let me read one more comment. the Constitution must include that all elected officials, judicial officials, and all executive government officers must declare all of their assets, and it must be accessible to the general public. That's from Samuel Clark. And one more, this is from Adrian Hines. The office of the Prime Minister in our adaptation has too much power. Given the strength of the political party whip, given the lack of the tradition of different/new prime ministers emerging within the life of a particular parliament, if the majority of the members see it fit to do so, a prime minister can become burden for the life of that parliament to the detriment of the country. Or does anyone else want to have a say? I'm not seeing any more hands at this point in time. Let me just reply then to that last comment from Mr. Hines. To be honest with you, I am one of those people who goes on Wikipedia, goes on different websites, and I search for the longevity of various politicians who've been in office, especially heads of government. And to be very honest with you, Barbados has had a healthy turnover of heads of government over the years, especially since independence. In fact, since the introduction of cabinet government before independence. We've had prime ministers come, we've had premiers come, and premiers go. We've had prime ministers come, and prime ministers go. And we have had extremely stable government, and I don't know the extent to which you can say that prime ministers have been burdens onto the people of Barbados. Since I'm here sitting with the Parliamentary Reform Commission, that's as far as I'm going to go with that one. But what I will say to you in relation to that is that at the end of the day, what we've seen in the parliamentary system is that the people of Barbados have had their say on the government of the day. And whenever the people want the government in, they're in. When the people want the government out, they're out. There's never been a situation where we've had governments that have been burdens onto the people. One more comment says from Clark's Panama, says, I am in agreement with the intervention of Ambassador Tonika Seeley Thompson on how to facilitate voting from the diaspora.
And there's one from Adrian Hines. I am not for diaspora voting. There are way more persons with Barbadian citizenship living overseas than at home, and that they can have a deleterious effect of the functioning and good governance of the country.
So what we have now is obviously a difference of opinion between some people in terms of the extent to which the diaspora should be allowed to vote in Barbados. Mr. Samuel Clark, you have your hands up. Would you like to speak again?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity again. There's a great book written by Lani Guinier called Tyranny of the Majority. That's a book should be assigned for reading by the Commission to look. Called Tyranny of the Majority, and proportional representation, which I think must be one of the avenues looked at in the new Constitution. That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. But when you say it should be looked at in the new Constitution, looked at for what purpose exactly?
No, the purpose, if you want to see how tyranny of the majority rules, and these are proportional representation, right? And the lack thereof, right? And that is a book that should be read so you can get an idea of what proportional representation will do for a healthy democracy.
So you're in favor of proportional representation then, right?
Sure. Yes, I am.
And that's because you think it would have a more stable government?
You don't know that everybody will feel that they have a right to say in the process. You know, you can't just get first past the poll is something that's so yesteryear. A colonial legacy that needs to be done away with. First past the poll doesn't do anything. Look what first past the poll have done. If we had, let's say, 50% of the people voted, right? How much people left home, right? So do you mean that they don't have a say, right? So, you know, it must be looked at. It's serious like that. There's another part of local government that must be involved. The Torn Commission has a very good review of local government being implemented within the Constitution. And I think that should be added in the Constitution, because if you bring it through Parliament, it can always be done away with by another party in power. But when it is constitutionalized, it is there, enshrined for us and everybody all the right. Local government is another way to go if you don't want to open up the idea of more constituency. As the ambassador Link said, it's so big and they don't have enough time. So local governments can play that, can bridge that gap.
Okay, thank you very much. In relation to local government, that is part of what we've been dealing with as well. If other people have comments that they want to make on local government, please go ahead. Mr. Andrew Reid, you would like to make a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. Yeah, first of all, to probably repeat a few things that I said already and confer with them. Well, first of all, I'd like to obviously congratulate Barbados on being a republic. I didn't get a chance to say that before, and I'm well pleased with that. Again, I'd just like to reiterate proportional representation. I think it will be good for Barbados, and I heard one mention about additional seats being made. That would be also good, because in any political system, I believe there must be opposition. The few that haven't voted, there must be always a good opportunity to have good governance. So, and that thing. As in terms of, we were talked about overseas voting. Personally, living in the UK, I do not want to have my vote to have a more greater vote than the people that live there. And also, I don't want my vote to be able to be over-influence the people in Barbados. But what I would look like my vote to do is to raise our concerns about how the government is run, whether there's a voice maybe at the Senate, at that level, but at some level where our voices can be heard. I think we need to have proper envoys distributed around the country that can gather our voices from the diaspora, where the country they're from, so that we have a collective from maybe from the UK, from the Americas, from Brazil, Belize, and so we can have a collective of what people have been saying. Lastly, I just want to point, as an overseas person and a trade unionist, if I come and live there to work, how this new republic is going to protect low-paid workers or workers in general, and what improvements they can make being a republic in terms of workers' rights. But that's an important thing from my side. If I wanted to come there and live and work there, how well is my job protected? Within the UK, we have strong employment rights, and I believe Barbados is moving towards that, but they are long for short of protecting workers. And that was it, and that is mine. I'm going to just make my contribution to that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. There's a comment made here that says the right for the diaspora to vote might come with them having to pay taxes into the Barbados Treasury, no matter where they live in the world. No taxation without representation, right? So no representation without taxation as well. It actually is a principle that comes from Barbados 100 years before America. So putting that on the table for you all to consider. Dr. Lashley, would you like to speak again? I know your hand is up.
You just took the words out of my mouth. That was exactly my issue, is that out of Barbados came no taxation without representation. So are people who are advocating, and I'm being repetitive because you just said it, but are people who are advocating that the diaspora vote, are they looking at rights and responsibilities? One thing to say I have the right, but then you have to, do we have the responsibility of paying taxes? And are people prepared to pay two sets of taxes? The taxes to where they live and the taxes to Barbados to ensure the right to vote. It seems to me that it's a rights and responsibility issue, and I don't know if this has been thoroughly considered, and I certainly think it would need to be thoroughly vetted if we were to go down that route. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lashley. Just 1 minute, please. this is a point that we would like everyone to consider. So if you have comments on this or any other points, please go ahead and make them. Universal taxation is a key feature in some countries, such as the United States of America, and of course they have diaspora voting as well. There is a comment here about it says that the diaspora contains different constituents. Some have never been to Barbados. They should they have more of a say than someone who lives there? Only U.S. citizens who pay taxes get to vote. Afghanistan doesn't have a democracy. Are there any other people who would like to have a say?
I would just like to respond back to about paying. I don't mind paying as long as I know that it's going to go towards better health care, better workers' rights, and better road systems. Okay, I don't think if we're going to vote and be part of it, I don't think we outside wouldn't mind paying a small fee for that privilege. If it's going to make the people in Barbados, especially when we visit, healthcare, workers' rights, and so forth, are much better and are improved on a yearly basis. If that happens, then I will gladly willing to pay a few pounds towards it.
Thank you very much. I think many people here, especially those in government, would welcome your few pounds. So, sir, you congratulated Barbados on becoming a republic, and like I did at the Barbados Community College Town Hall with the young people there, I asked them, how do they feel about Barbados becoming a republic? Is it material to them? Do any of you all have like a strong sentiment in terms of us becoming a republic? Like, what does it mean to you? Sir, maybe you'd like to go first? I don't know, since you did the congratulations earlier.
Myself?
Yes, please.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I'm glad that you have independence. Independence is something that a lot of countries want. You know, born in the UK, we have a royal family here. And I heard a lot of things originally that Barbados didn't have its own say in terms of criminal justice, and they have the right to the UK for the Privy Council and so forth. So I'm happy for you to have true independence now. I don't know what that will look like in the future, but I hope that it gives you the opportunity to gain further economic support from diasporas from abroad. It helped us to strengthen what Barbados is all about, and its history, and its legacy, and its contact with Africa, and that connection. So it raises great opportunities at the moment for the Barbados, I believe, in being a complete independent.
Okay, thank you, sir. Just to note that not only is Barbados a republic with a president as head of state, but we're also a member country of the Caribbean Court of Justice in both jurisdictions, the original jurisdiction under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, and the appellate jurisdiction, so the Caribbean Court of Justice, a completely Caribbean court, is our highest court. Ambassador Seeley Thompson, would you like to speak now?
Yes, thank you. Just to say that from my perspective here in Brazil, the fact of us being a republic is extremely important to our brand. It's very important to the way that we are recognized here. The news about Barbados becoming a republic resonated incredibly throughout Brazil. And I think that the question of the decolonization of the systems that constitute government, legislature, and so on. A comment I wanted to make earlier is that oftentimes we might not know that something is broken because we're so used to it. And we might not recognize the extent to which some things might be influenced by a system that was designed for the colonial design's purpose. And in a certain sense, I suppose my point is that the process of decolonization is one that will be ongoing. I don't think we can be expected to even recognize all of the things that a structure that is to be fair to the fathers and mothers of independence, you know, there was a certain, there has been much evidence of the ways in which the decolonization process has been happening before independence and since. I think our educational efforts, the design of our syllabus is one of the things that where we can find concerted efforts to ensure that there's a certain amount of content that reflects who we are and, you know, where we want to be, how we want to be seen. Of course, there's always work to be done. A colleague just referenced the more recent efforts to engage with Africa and the African diaspora and associated that with the fact of our being a republic. And I think those things must be more clearly yoked. And certainly the work of the Prime Minister to, on the international stage, to place Barbados's efforts with respect to calling for more fair systems of even international finance are, I think, in concert with everything that has to do with being the determiner of our own futures, of our own presence. And so I think, speaking from the perspective of understanding decolonization, not as a process that happens just so because one declares oneself a republic, but as perhaps a more reflective and intensive process, perhaps one of the things that might be contemplated within the framework of this discussion about what the Parliament looks like is for that ongoing work of decolonization to be something that is of parliamentary import and in fact of institutional import across the board. That is what I felt inspired to say. I think the connection, therefore, between everything that has to do with gender equality, fair representation for marginalized groups, and the consciousness that we have around that is bound up with how we manifest our true sense of freedom in the world. And I would just take a moment to, I reference this a lot as I introduce Barbados and Brazil within my own speaking as the world's newest republic, because it helps many Brazilians to connect to the idea. Professor Hilary Beckles' lecture, I think it was at the Embassy of Washington where he spoke. And he said something that has never left my own consciousness, which is that Barbados, having been the place where the very tools of colonization and enslavement of human beings were developed to the extent that they were, to the extent that the word "to Barbados" becomes used as a methodology for spreading that system, means that Barbados, in seeking to be the freest country in the world now, has almost this ancestral debt. And this is, I think, something of great potency in the world. It has potency at the site of our international relations. It has potency at the site of how we stand in the world. It resonates with the voice of the Prime Minister as she calls for more fairness and justice. And once upon a time, the word justice and even putting the word social justice and diplomacy together may have been things that we would have been less likely to do. But to the extent that democracy and the fight for democracy becomes so important, especially today, as a global, the global relevance of the insistence on true democracy, I think Barbados's reputation, the Barbados brand, the Barbados idea is totally bound up with it, the fact of it being a republic, and it's totally bound up with perhaps all struggles for democracy everywhere. I offer that as a personal perspective, but also of one that I'm able to develop because I have the privilege of serving Barbados in a part of the world where these questions are very important.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador. We are in now to our last 40 minutes. We are going to end at 4 Barbados time. We want to thank you for your very keen participation and encourage you to keep making your contributions. We've had over 200 people online at this time on the various channels, and people have been coming and going, joining various streams and coming off again. So there are quite a few people online. I believe that when we track the numbers, we're going to find that we had quite a few hundred people online over the course of the day. You've heard me more than once this evening, so I am not going to lead this session. I am pleased and honored to have with me the Clerk of Parliament, Attorney at Law, Pedro Eastman, and Pedro is the official secretary to the Parliamentary Reform Commission. You've been meeting the commissioners in 1-hour segments during this period, and Pedro is going to be leading this session.
Good afternoon, Ambassador Thompson. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all those who have joined us on this Zoom hall meeting. Good night to some, and good morning to some. It's not very often that I get to lead Ambassador Thompson. Over the years, I've advised her about not lead her. So I want to thank her for this opportunity. And I want to say up front that when we're discussing parliamentary reform, and it's important to note that Barbados in this year is 384 years as a parliament. So we are really the third oldest parliament in the Commonwealth, a mature democracy, mature enough to undertake the reform of its parliamentary system. I know earlier one of the callers said if it's not fixed, if it's not broken, no need to fix it. But we still feel that as a republic, that the aspects of our system that we can reform, and we have started some of that reform ourselves. We this year appointed three standing committees, dealing with we have three committees, one on the social sector and the environment, there's one on governance on policy matters, and economic and productive sectors. I know some callers earlier had mentioned the introduction of a wider parliamentary committee system to allow the parliament to be, I would say, to keep check on the executive. And that system is working well. The question, and I know this was raised by Ambassador Noah Lynch, the whole question of a greater number of MPs, the whole question of should MPs be full-time. And the question would be, if we're going to have a full-time parliament, are we ready to pay for the democracy? Because a full-time parliament is going to require more pay and more remuneration for parliamentarians. I know this is a very sticky subject. Persons don't have very strong and good views on the political class, but the political class has been responsible, the two political parties over the last 50 years, for some of the most development, forward thinking that this country has actually experienced. And I think at some point in this process we have to give kudos to the political parties, for in a system that we followed closely very much on the Westminster system, we've still been able to deliver for our people much meaningful development. Now I think there's Adrian Hines who's asked a question. Go ahead, Mr. Hines.
I didn't have my hand up. It was initially, and then it was removed, so I didn't really have a question. But now that I have this form, I guess I could put my stuff in there. The existing, to me, the glaring ridiculousness of what exists in the current parliament is that we have a cabinet that is so large that the parliament cannot exercise its responsibility, its oversight responsibility. And given that cabinet with its collective responsibility clause and the duality of parliamentarians serving as ministers, clearly that oversight is lost. And that, I think, is one of the hallmarks of Westminster, being a mixed government system, is to allow for that oversight of cabinet by the larger parliament. So to Ambassador Lynch's point, that we need to really look at separating ministerial portfolios from Parliament. If you're a parliamentarian, you want to become a minister, you should be made to resign from that, so that Parliament can continue to have that oversight. Because in our adaptation of Westminster, we've given so much power to the office of Prime Minister. And Ezra Allen, in his column on the Record back in 2010, spoke to that awesome power of the Prime Minister, as he did he looked at the office of the President in the United States with regards to the office of the Prime Minister in a country like Barbados with Westminster, and he said that the Prime Minister has much more power, and we see that centralization of power. But then, for a functioning democracy, we should have that oversight capacity. So yes, I think for one, ministerial portfolios should be reduced. It should be mandated in the Constitution that it shouldn't be, it should be X amount. If portfolios have to be doubled up by one minister, then ministers should not be parliamentarians. That's it. Thank you.
A very interesting comment, sir, because at the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, there is a recommendation on benchmarks for democratic legislatures. And one of those recommendations is that the cabinet should be 1/3 the size of the parliament. Now, this is not a very popular benchmark with politicians, because if we had to use the Barbados situation, where Barbados to adopt this benchmark, it would mean we would only have 10 ministers. Now, there is a very interesting article put up by the UK Parliament on the size of Parliament and what do ministers really do. And one of the recommendations that came to the Commission from retired permanent secretaries is the institution of greater committees. And they're of the view that we really should have 9 ministries. Now, the Commission has to meet with retired group. I know there are different views on the Commission in relation to the size of Parliament, the size of the Cabinet, sorry. And the other issue is, given the complex nature of government, would 10 ministers be sufficient to carry out those complex roles? And in order to achieve the oversight function of Parliament, there might be a need to make Parliament bigger, to have greater representatives and more representatives as called for by Ambassador Noah Lynch. But as I said, the call for more representatives, the call for full-time representatives, forces us to address the cost of democracy. And I would like to hear some members on the cost of democracy.
I ain't gonna deal with the cost of, and I'm just gonna finish with this, but I think if we agree that for democracy's sake and for the true functioning of Parliament, that oversight is necessary, then we definitely have to do something about these cabinets going from 16 to 17 to 20 to 28 or whatever, and bring that back into a more manageable expectation. So we have to start somewhere, right? Government is costing us a lot of money today, and I remember the current Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Motley, when she was first opposed as the leader of the opposition. She made a comment that Parliament needed to be increased, and her concept was to have large parliamentarians, meaning that they are elected to Parliament from a wider popular vote, not a constituency vote. And you don't need a lot of them. Similar to, in concept, to what I think was the idea behind the senior minister approach, where these senior ministers look into multiple portfolios. So there are ways to address it if we agreed that what is currently taking place in our parliament, having a cabinet so large that the parliament cannot do its job, and see that as really a direct threat to democracy, and giving credence to this idea that we're creeping into an authoritarian state, given how things are made up. Even though that might not be in reality, it looks that way. If we come to that realization, then we can find a solution. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for your comment, sir. I would like to hear other persons on the Zoom on this whole issue of the size of the cabinet.
Pedro, yes. I want to come in here because I noticed that you talk about the committee system. You said that there are 3 committees system now that have been introduced in the parliament. I want to find out if these are now cemented in your standing orders of parliament. Because we know that governments come and governments go, and we need something that can be established. That there must be oversight committees to look at the financial status of government, and also to look at things like approval and acquisition of land for public purposes. These are things that I believe that should be discussed on a full-time basis. Now, when we talk about full-time parliamentarians, we do not mean that Parliament must meet, let's say, 12 months in any 1 year. Right now, I think you're best able to tell me how many times Parliament meet. I know that there's some years Parliament met over 45 times in that year. But full-time parliamentarians would mean that you have to have an office open for the full year. You have to do things in your constituency. You have to be able to give service. And I think a full-time parliamentarian is important. Now, you asked the question about the cost. The cost of democracy is high. Democracy is high, and the population will have to understand that the cost of democracy is high. The cost of autocracy is even higher. So if you want democracy, you need to understand that it has to be paid for. I do not subscribe to the view that in this day and age, you have parliamentarians who are spending more and more time in the private practices and doing things, but at the same time, you want to introduce another system of government, whether it's local government or whatever. So we need to have, as we go forward in this term, I think on the next term and for the unforeseeable future, we need to look at what system we are going to introduce into Parliament. I believe too that I do not believe that we need to scrap the Senate. I believe that there must be a house where you can review some of the dealings of Parliament, of the House of Assembly, so that I see the role for the Senate. Because if you add the 30 plus the 21, you have 51, and of course you say you need to have, and if you have 2 persons representing the diaspora, you will have 55 persons in Parliament. And I think I subscribe that is a good view. So that I feel that as we go forward, Pedro, we need to look at the whole question of what it is that we want as a nation. I see that democracy is very important, and that we need to, the populace must understand, and accountability is the key here. And my last question is though, the Public Accounts Committee. The Public Accounts Committee. Now, I believe that the Public Accounts Committee, it used to be chaired by the opposition leader. What has become of the Public Accounts Committee? I think that in a case where and if you have, as I said before, that I propose a system of first past the poll plus proportional representation, where you have 30 persons past the poll system and 5 for the proportional representation. In that system, you may have where persons can be assigned to the Public Accounts Committee. The Public Accounts Committee is that committee that is very important, and I think we need to look carefully at its members, and I believe the Auditor General should be a member of the Public Accounts Committee. If not, the chair could be a standing members of that committee. All right, I want to hear your reply on these things.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Clark. Now, the Public Accounts Committee, the Auditor General is not a member, but is seen as almost a fixture of the Public Accounts Committee. That certainly in our view, the Auditor General is almost the investigating arm of the Public Accounts Committee, and the reports of the Auditor General are those reports that really fuel any investigation by the committee itself. The challenge that the committee has faced within the last two parliaments, but initially in the first parliament, the one of 2018, you will remember that we had one of the government members crossing the floor to become leader of the opposition. So the Public Accounts Committee automatically had a chairman. What has happened since 2022 is that we've repeated the situation in the parliament where one party has all the seats, so there's no leader of the opposition. And the Public Accounts Committee calls for that committee to be chaired by the leader of the opposition, or somebody who doesn't support the government. And only this week we had a discussion in the Parliament Reform Commission where there are independent senators on the committee, but because the committee is seen as almost an opposition committee, as it were, chaired by the leader of the opposition, independent senators are very loath to take up the chair of that committee for fear of being seen as in opposition to the government. And that is a real issue, and the Commission has decided that we will seek a legal opinion on that, so we could settle the whole issue of the chairmanship of the committee, so that the committee could really begin to do its work. Now, in relation to the standing committees, the standing orders were amended. You asked the question whether they were enshrined in law. They are in the standing orders, but as you are aware, as a long-serving parliamentarian, you know, a subsequent parliament, because you can't bind a future parliament. A future parliament may decide that they don't want to have these standing committees and could change the standing orders. So what I would say is that, in my experience, those committees that have been formed and have worked, future governments find it very difficult to change, because people can see them working, and the Parliament sees them working, and see that they're in the interest of an efficient parliamentary system, and they are very reluctant to change those things. And the committee system, you know, allows for members to really have a greater role in what the government is doing, and it's of benefit to the government as well. The government gets to see a different perspective, you know, on these things. And the more committees we have, it means that the parliament naturally has to evolve into a full-time parliament. I mean, as it stands now, you have the House meeting on a Tuesday and the Senate on Wednesday. And if you have 3 committees, where those committees be meeting simultaneously, you know, you can find yourself the entire week being taken up with parliamentary work. And even now with just 3 committees, those members who are not full-time find it very difficult to serve these committees and to still devote themselves to their work. I mean, even on the Parliament Reform Commission, we meet sometimes twice a week full-time, you know, for the full day. And
Yeah, John, not across you. I want to ask, I want to butt in here and ask a question, because I know that if you have the committee system, you need more staff You need more legal people involved in looking at bills and so on. And very often bills come before the Parliament and they're not properly explained. You know, members of Parliament sometimes don't have, a cabinet will have it, will have their technical advisors, but very often parliamentarians would have the expertise from a lawyer or an accountant to look at a bill. And I believe that to reform Parliament, you also need to have a more clerical staff in terms of lawyers and accountants and so on to help Parliament understand the intricacies of the bills, so that there's a need for, if you're going to have the committee system, more persons involved, more well, clerks of Parliament. You may have maybe junior clerks, but so you need to have a bigger staff. You know, Barbados is doing well. Barbados is not a third world country anymore, so we have to go forward, and that's how we see it. The future, we have to look at the implications, let's say, of all these things that the government is doing at this time, and they want to, you know, congratulate the government for the foresight in terms of doing the financial committee that meet at the estimate. I think that's a wonderful step, but we need to have it going more and more throughout the year. This whole question of accountability is very, very important, you know, very important. So we need to look at the Public Accounts Committee need to meet. That's how we see it. And we need to have a role for the chairman.
Ambassador Clark, the things you are proposing, even the committees.
I need a screwdriver.
The government.
You can bring the power screwdriver from my room.
Could you mute your mic, sir? Mute your mic, please. I think when Ambassador Clark, I think when the government established these 3 additional committees, they were told that in time you will need additional staff. But as I say, all these things, additional staff, additional probably legal unit in the Parliament, but you know, we see the 2 Parliament buildings and they look huge from the outside. And we've almost used up all the space in those 2 buildings. And with these additional committees, the time is going to come where we have to, and that's always been my view anywhere, that we should look to acquire some of the surrounding property and have the administrative staff operate from those surrounding buildings and leave the Parliament buildings for members and the offices, because the moment you have full-time members, the moment you have committees, you need to have more than one room to facilitate the meeting of the committee. And as I said, that is a natural follow-on from, you know, the improvements that we'll be making. And additional costs, it comes back to that all the time. You know, whenever parliamentarians suggest improvements, you know, the first question you hear is, you want more money now? You know, so as I said, in our 385th year as a parliament, you know, the need for reform, yes, we want to take on that. They need to see, you know, the workings of the Parliament as integral to the democracy, and any proper functioning democracy is a cost. But I think over time that the public will get to see the real benefits of this expenditure. You know, when you have a more efficient government, a more efficient Parliament, delivering what has been promised to our citizens. In relation to the Standing Finance Committee, which now operates at estimates, it is a more comprehensive committee system, which you get more details on the estimates, more explanations. In the past, we met for a whole week and only dealt with 2 heads. You have significant ministries with significant expenditure that were never ever examined. With this Standing Finance Committee, which now allows public servants to come in to develop the house. I know there have been some objections from commentators saying that, you know, that the develop the house is not for civil servants but for politicians. When public servants come to develop the house, it's not to explain the policy. That is still the function of the minister. And when you have the chairman of committees insist that any questions posed in relation to policy has to be answered by the minister, what the civil servants are asked to do is to explain how that policy is implemented in terms of the different programs that you do during the year. And I think one of the additions that we have to that system is to have a report at the end of the year as to how well those programs have functioned before you go into another year of the committee asking and inquiring on the future expenditure of a particular department. Anyone else who wants to make a contribution on this? Committees, the size of the executive, vis-a-vis the size of the parliament.
I would just quickly say the whole idea of the civil servants coming into the well of the parliament was a good idea, but I think what soured in the minds of the people, Barbadians, is that it was ministers functioning as parliamentarians, questioning that duality, and at the end of the day, Barbadians are led to believe that ministers run these departments, and here it is, they're questioning the people who are not the leaders of those departments. So it was kind of confusing. If there were just parliamentarians and not ministers themselves, then the ministers or the civil servants would come into the well and have to account to the people's representative. As the people's representative, it would have been a better sell. But it was that duality of ministers functioning as parliamentarians, questioning civil servants about the running of the various departments that was, to my mind, confusing.
So if I may just respond to that, I think that was just occasioned by the particular scenario following the last two elections. Now, had we had that system in 2013, where you had 16 on one side and 14 on the other side, you would have seen a proper that system working as is intended to work, because you would have had civil servants being questioned by ordinary parliamentarians. It's just because the makeup of the parliament now, you know, and you would have had opposition. And I'm telling you, if that system had been in place in 2013, we would need about 10 weeks. I'm serious too, you know, because it lends itself, you know, to serious examination of the government's finances. But it doesn't happen now because of the makeup of the parliament. And so I'm happy that the system has been introduced, because whenever when it returns to normality, I see these last two elections as not normal, the normal things over the course of time. And we would then see the real benefit of that Standing Finance Committee. And one of the other benefits, because we followed our sister parliament in Trinidad, and one of the things that ministers discovered in the Standing Finance Committee there was that they discovered things about their ministries that they didn't even know through examination in the parliament. Right, so it leads to transparency all around, and for better governance and a more effective parliamentary system. Any other callers? Any other one? I see Dr. Lashley, your hand is up. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. This will be my last comment. First of all, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this really, really very important conversation. The last thing, I don't know the answer to this, so I'm really asking the question. When people are appointed as ministers, are their mandate letters made public such that, you know, accountability and transparency is not only encouraged, but demanded? So are those mandate letters made public?
I don't think so, Dr. Lashley, but what this government has done on the last two occasions was to have public swearing in of the cabinet, and that therefore sort of ensured that they were not only swearing, you know, but when we were under the monarchical system, they were swearing to the Queen, but recently, obviously, in the Republic, they're swearing to Barbados. They were swearing to Barbados not in a private ceremony, but in open public, so that all Barbados, you know, heard them made their declarations as to, you know, being faithful to serve the interests of Barbados. So I think that was a very important step, and is almost akin to having their mandate really public.
May I respectfully challenge your interpretation, sir?
Okay.
I agree that having that part of it made public is certainly important and introduces an element of transparency. But the things for which they're responsible, what they have been mandated to do within that session, those mandates, if they're not made public, how does one know to what one can hold that person, and for what one can hold that person responsible? If you don't know what is in the letter, that the Prime Minister, the government said, these are the things that I expect you to accomplish during this session, it seems to me that those things should be made public. And someone spoke earlier about recall, but on what are you going to base your recall if you don't know what they were supposed to do? So I'm not trying to dispute with you. I'm just trying to say that I must regretfully reject a part of your argument. Thank you.
What I would add is that the areas of which they have responsibility for is certainly made public, but I am not aware of a mandate as such that is made public.
Thank you very much. May I suggest that that's one of the things that could be considered?
Yeah, we will deal with that at the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, we are getting close to that time when we have to respectfully close. But are there any final comments? I see Cynthia Wave, Barbados. Go ahead, ma'am.
No, I just would like to say thank you very much for holding this session this afternoon. It's been quite enlightening for me. I do agree with what our ambassadors mentioned earlier in regards to the diaspora representation. I think that's something that would be excellent. I think it's probably along the same guidelines as what the Jamaican government has put in place for their country as well. So I think Barbados would be definitely, it'll benefit Barbados greatly to have something like that in place for us as well.
I think Ambassador Thompson will be heartened by your support. And any other comments at this time?
So my phone is telling me that it's 3:59, and we're supposed to close at 4 o'clock. I should therefore like to take this opportunity to thank the staff of the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Center for the excellent arrangements this evening. Oversight, their entire team has turned out and did a great job. We had some technical challenges at the beginning, but they addressed everything, and we had a clear uninterrupted stream, and no matter what part of the diaspora people messaged us from or came in from, we were able to get them with great clarity, both visibly and audibly. Our ladies doing interpretation for the hearing impaired, Ms. Medford and Mrs. Leons, thank you both so very much for ensuring that members of the community who are challenged with their hearing were able to participate, to join in, and to know what is happening. For those who came out to attend in person, we are deeply grateful to have some warm smiles and a physical presence of others in the room. The staff of Parliament, always for their commitment and their journey with us as the Commission has gone all over Barbados, geographically, having town hall meetings in every in strategic geographic locations to hear from Barbadians. We have 2 more town hall meetings scheduled, and they are going to be our final 2. This is, in fact, our 8th town hall meeting, and numbers 9 and 10 will be held on the 29th and 30th of October, respectively. You are invited to join us via YouTube, via GIS, via the Public Affairs Division, via the Parliament website, via the Barbados Labour Party. So there are multiple streams available for every single town hall and every broadcast. And on the 29th at 7 in the evening Barbados time, we go to George Street, to the headquarters of the Democratic Labour Party, to hear from the Democratic Labour Party executive, arms, and members of that organization, what are their views on the issues of parliamentary reform. On the following day, the 30th and 31st. Oh, I'm giving you the wrong date, I'm being told. On the 30th and 31st. Really? Okay, so. No, it should be the 30th and 31st. Ah, I thought, oh, yes, okay. Well, you can blame that on the fact that we started at midday and I haven't eaten since breakfast, so blood sugar levels are low. On the 30th and 31st, so just to correct that, we will go to the Democratic Labour Party headquarters on the 30th at 7 o'clock in the evening Barbados time, and on the 31st, the next day, the Tuesday, at 6:30 in the evening, we go to the headquarters of the Barbados Labour Party to hear their members, their arms, and the arms of the party, that is, and their executive at 6:30 in the evening. So all our meetings have been held at 7 o'clock. No, it's the other way around. Is it?
Seven.
Theirs is at 7, but the one at the Democratic Labour Party is at 6:30. Yes, so all our other meetings were at 7. I apologize that I've been confusing you a bit. All our other meetings, for those of you who have been following the stream, and we've had certainly well over 10,000 people follow these meetings online. So those meetings have traditionally been at 7, and we will meet with the Democratic Labour Party on the 30th at their George Street headquarters at 7 p.m., and that meeting will be streamed live. That's a Monday. Yes, at 6:30. At 6:30 for the Democratic Labour Party. And the next day, no, this is bad, at 6:30 for the Democratic Labour Party on the Monday, the 30th. And on Tuesday, the 31st, at BLP headquarters, it will be 7 o'clock. We're going to start later. So, and both meetings are going to be streamed. I know that both political parties have strong supporters across the diaspora, and you should be keen to hear, should be interested in hearing what the parties themselves are going to be recommending or going to be suggesting and saying. I want to thank all Barbadians everywhere, whatever country, whatever time zone you are in, for taking the time to join us this evening, to share your views, to give your opinions, to make your recommendations, to say what is of concern to you and what you want to see our Parliament look like and do going forward. Thank you so very much from all the members of the Commission for being with us these last 4 hours. Some people came in and went out, and we want to thank you all. Thank you so very much, and good evening from Barbados. Good morning, good afternoon, good day. Wherever you are, stay safe.